just to be a dealer, not including the bikes themselves. Right.
To
That's
be an
it.
authorized,
franchise.
seller.
Essentially, yeah, it's almost a franchise fee.
That's a lot. That's a lot of bikes.
And they, you know, he didn't sell that many bikes. I mean, most of them just sit there, right? They were renting them out for a while, where they had a few bikes where you could rent, but even then, I think that slowed down.
You still belong life? You belong lifetime?
Yeah, until they jack up the rates again. I was talking to one of the guys
They've
there.
already jacked them up?
Yeah.
Well, so they jacked up the rates from what Lakeshore was, and now it's like $89 for a single membership because it's an Onyx level. They were going to make it a Diamond level, and they may still make it a Diamond level. Diamond level would be $159 for a single person membership.
Wow,
Yeah, that's probably what.
When that happens, I'm gone.
Yeah, what do you get for an extra, what, $7?
It's the exact same facility. It's almost double for the exact same facility. They're not going to change anything, not going to anything. And what really pissed me off is they took away one of the basketball courts, and then they shrunk the other basketball. They had 2 basketball courts. They took one away, and then the one that they left, they shrunk it.
Yeah, for that like the group fitness almost like.
Yeah, it's the group fitness that no one's ever in.
Yeah.
I mean, what I told them they need to do is they have the 2 tennis courts upstairs that hardly ever get used. Convert one of those to an outdoor basketball court.
Pickleball.
No.
Yeah, off the roof, that'd be great. I don't know. I've been there, member since day one. We used to have great basketball games, but we very rarely ever ran 2 courts. And the only time we ever used the full court was for the leagues. So I didn't mind. I didn't mind cutting 1 court down. I thought that was a good move. I thought it would make it maybe more attractive to maybe play games rather than people shooting at 6 separate courts.
Problem is that, you know, so I've got a 11 and 12, or I got a 12-year-old and 13-year-old,
Yeah.
and they can go and do whatever they want, but most of what they can do is swim and use the basketball.
Yeah.
Well, when the big kids are in there, my kids get pushed out, and so they never get a chance to even play or even shoot. You know, they're not going to go on a cardio machine. They're not going to go lift weights. They're going to swim or play basketball. That's it.
Yeah.
Missed it. Is there a board up there that shows something?
Huh?
Yeah, is that the
Tesla?
Oh,
You know,
as you
Tesla
can
station
tell,
here.
I'm fully aware walking around.
Oh, dealership.
But I do think they're,
Part one.
when you mentioned that,
Oh, really?
they are doing that potentially. They're doing a solar panel.
It's going to be. But Teslers don't have dealerships. They have
It's
like.
gonna be like a full service,
Okay.
dealership, like.
Because Tesla
Like you're
is.
still not, you still can't like drive it off the lot, like it's just a showroom for
Right.
cars, but it's gonna have a service.
Okay, because they usually go to malls and you buy it from a mall.
I was in DC and I walked past one, I'm like, what the?
If you go to Aspen, it's
It was
like
just in the
on
mall.
the main.
It was like, just like a Foot Locker.
Right, that's what Tesla is. You know, I had a bunch of friends 3 years ago buy those, the new ones. What is the Model 3 or whatever that new one's supposed to be? And it's not even out. No, the Model S was the first one. Or besides the Roadster, it was the Roadster, then there was the Model S,
Whatever
then the Model
the
X.
cheaper one is,
Yeah. They have the Model 3 and the Model Y, because he's trying to spell sexy. Three backwards.
Oh, the second. Yeah. Slick.
They wouldn't let him have the Model E because they didn't want him to actually spell sexy, so he changed it to a 3.
Great. So how much more time do you have?
I don't have this in a Word file. Shit, that's the wrong one.
Do you summarize or?
I try to type as fast as I can.
You need to record it, dictate,
Oh man,
transcribe.
sounds like a lot of pressure.
Actually, I think we were talking about you were taking notes, right?
That's why I asked. So
Well, yeah, I mean, who's
the
gonna
day that I
pick it
have
up?
to.
Who's gonna pick it up when Corey's share?
Right.
Who says I'll ever
Remember
make
what
it to
the
chair?
detention pond
Yeah.
was? So it's just it's a redundant detention pond.
Right.
They found out
That's
parts.
totally going on.
Yeah, so
Indoor
that's-
space, 5-year trails plan. I try and just type down the agenda before the meeting, considering I just got off a plane and just made it here in time. I'm just typing it now.
Oh, Tesla's actually building
It's
it.
gonna take up part of the space.
Does that affect the parks and the?
I literally was on a plane on the apron
It's
at
the
like
corridor.
6:50,
Well,
no,
so-
I don't think
5:45, I think,
It does- it
5:50 we
actually makes a
landed.
bigger
I didn't get off the
part.
plane
Well,
until
so
like,
there's a couple
it was like
things.
6:15 when I left the airport.
So one.
So, I was like, I hope I make it on
The plan
time.
with the creek was flip the creek, repair the creek, flip the creek back.
Youth programming.
So we partnered with Urban Drainage. Urban Drainage said, why are you spending $500,000 to flip the creek? Flip the creek back. Flip the creek, widen out your corridor. So you actually
Updates,
get wider
where's the
repair
updates?
corridor, you actually get more park space. So so that's kind of what we're looking at right now, because we actually think it's a really good opportunity to make the park corridor bigger.
Per day.
Is that,
What about
You
the
flip
park?
it up that.
Parking size.
hey,
No.
Just literally flip it.
is that,
It's actually, it's pretty good.
that's a good
I
one.
have to wait till the other
Yeah,
side.
one of each year.
That's okay.
Tell them they need to put in a solar powered USB charging station that does like 400 USBs. So we can all just go there and charge everything we need.
Yeah.
Hang out.
So it's,
That's a teen amenity right there.
so actually, we had, Kevin Klum, our youth advisory committee liaison, has reached out to the kids about their, like, amenities that they would like to see in the parks. Posts for hammocks, and that's actually becoming a thing. Like, you're actually getting, just like slacklining, you're getting
Mhm.
dedicated hammock posts.
So they can go out and read and do their
Yeah, and
things.
then like you're actually getting backpacks.
We
Like their
need trees
backpacks
first.
come with spaces for their hammocks. Like it's actually becoming like a big deal.
Mhm.
And then they wanted more traditional spaces for games that they remember growing up. Foursquare,
Oh, yeah,
tetherball.
yeah.
So it was kind of interesting. It was cool. It was cool to listen to what their thoughts were. So, but yeah, hammock posts or dedicated trees that you could put hammocks on where they wouldn't get in trouble.
Very cool.
So I'll have a complete list.
Those are relatively cheap.
Okay, so let's call to order this meeting, PROSTAC, March 21st, 2018. We're all in attendance with the exception of Susan, who is excused. We'll start with public comment, if any.
Jim Payne, Superior resident. I prefer to comment during the pickleball discussion, if that's all right with you.
Okay, that's fine. So we were all present at the dinner last week with the, was it last week?
Yeah.
Last Monday with the board. So we're just gonna do a quick review of that. The first item being skate park. That seemed very clear from the trustees that the desire was to put the skate park at Autry Park next to the bike park. So I know that staff is already reaching out to the skate park design firm to start working on that, and you're going to look at making it bigger within the budget, correct?
Yeah, so the other thing we heard from the board was size it to what's appropriate for the area as opposed to sizing it for what would have been at the south pool. So we're looking at making it a little bit bigger. We're also looking at some features just because it is in it's in a floodway. So we're working on that now, and then we've also, the other thing that we heard was maybe add some amenities, smaller amenities back to the south pool location. So we've asked for a list, almost like a catalog cut of some amenities that we could look at for the South Pool location, get a revised budget, and a design over from you guys.
Do we know anything about the soil over there? Has there been any kind of soil analysis?
We're drilling for.
So we could be in the same scenario with soil?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah. But, there was, the board had indicated that, come back with an appropriate budget and, we'll kind of account for that. I will say, what we tend to deal with in the neighborhoods is when they excavate for homes, they put that dirt in areas that end up becoming our parks. So I'm somewhat optimistic that we'll have actually a little bit more compaction in a floodway. just because it's maybe, you know, a little more undisturbed and a little more compact, so we'll see. Probably sandier though, so.
The second item was community center. So the board did ask that this committee work on a vision for community center amenities, you know, beyond just what we've discussed before, which were primarily, you know, recreation centered amenities. So we'll talk about that later in a discussion item. And then the third item was pickleball. So we're also talking about that as a standalone item coming up here is we need to finalize a recommendation for a pickleball court location. The board seemed to favor the west field at Community Park area that we had been discussing. So we'll talk about that here in just a minute, but does anyone have any comments based on the board dinner that they'd like to share that aren't directly related, I guess, to pickleball location or community park or community center vision, since we'll talk about those in a few minutes. Skate park in particular.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is just, you know, the message I got from them also though is, even though they may say, hey, come back and look, you know, give us a recommendation on the location, give us your overall recommendation on the, you know, whether we should still be doing this or thinking about this in terms of the bigger picture of, you know, of the amenities list and how, of the master plan and how it all fits together. So when we're talking through these things, you know, it's not just a location, it's, we should still have the conversation about whether we still think it's, you know, right.
Well, and also how it fits with all the other components.
Right.
Because if it goes here, that one can't go there, and how they shift around. So just, that's a big underlying understanding to the master planning of where we suggest activities and amenities within the town.
Any other thoughts? Okay, so we'll move on to the next topic, which is the pickleball courts. So, you know, based on our discussion last month, we had favored the location in the Westfield at Community Park. Our secondary location was White Raven. There was some discussion of Autry Park, but we didn't seem to settle on that. So, you know, based on the board dinner again, the discussion seemed to favor the Community Park location, but we can have a further discussion on the amenity in general if we want now as well. So I guess I'll first open it up to public comment.
Did we totally eliminate Founders Park?
We can still discuss it, but it wasn't favored when we left the discussion last month, as I recall. But we can still discuss it.
Okay, good evening. Jim Payne. I'm a resident. I live on border on Community Park. I've also led the effort as chair of PROSTAC that oversaw the planning and development for Autry Park and numerous other parks and facilities. So I guess I have a number of concerns about the location in Community Park and also about the process that we're following or not following. It's clearly a much less thorough process than we have used in the past. Leading up to Autry Park, for example, there were very extensive analysis of the different possible locations. And in fact, and maybe you've done this, but we started with a discussion and agreement on the criteria for what would make a successful, first of all, a successful facility, and then secondly, impact on the neighborhood and the community. We did that for about 13 or 14 locations across the different facilities that we were looking at, because there were 3 facilities being considered: dog park, bike park, and disc golf. So first, and I think the most important thing is what is the best place for the facility and what is necessary and what are the criteria to make it a successful amenity. The town is, I know people appreciate, residents appreciate this. The town has always done, in almost every case, an outstanding job of designing the right facility with the right scope and scale, taking into account all of the important criteria for its success. And maybe you've done that, but I haven't seen it, and I didn't see the fact that Autry Park was sort of an afterthought was a little bit concerning to me, because I think it has some very, very good attributes for this particular facility. But let me talk about the community park. It's long been sort of a practice or an assumption that, and the town has did a very good job, and originally when it was laid out, did a very good job. It designates and designs active parks and sets them off with passive, and that's always been something that's been taken very seriously. This was a big discussion, and a lot of effort went into looking at this, and community outreach when we did, well, all the parks that I was involved with. I mean, El Dorado, Founders, Autry, and I'm a little concerned that I'm not seeing the same outreach and the same concern over putting this into community park. But there are a number of impacts that I think you need to consider, and I ask you to consider. One is the impact on the houses. There's a row of houses, one of which is mine, that runs along that section of the park on the north, and almost equidistant is another row of houses that backs up to it just across Colton. That would be Topaz Street. So there's a question about how much noise will actually be generated by this. I've looked at a number of the situations that are very prominent on the internet, and they tend to be in news accounts and so forth, because this is a hot topic in many parts of the country. And there are generally homes that are a couple of 100 feet from the facility. But I think I've also looked at studies online that show, and I know the town is doing some studies on this, that show and analyze the decibels and that sort of thing, where I don't know what ours is, but I can't remember what ours is, but generally it's in the 50 to 60 decibel range is what's considered sort of the benchmark in most places. But I just would suggest to you that it's not so much the decibels. It's not that it's so loud, like a car that's going by or a machine or something like that. It's the taka 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 all the time that is what raises the concern and the adversity where it has arisen in different parts of the country. So this is a very quiet, settled, natural space part of the park, and I'm a little surprised that with so little consideration, I think, we're talking about putting a very loud, active paddle sport into a settled, natural, open space part of the park. And so I think that's ill-advised, and even if you discount the impact on the homes for a minute, a lot of people use that part of the park for walks, for walking dogs, for their own recreation. It's quiet, it's peaceful, that's what it's designed to be. And you're really talking I don't know what it is, 100 feet from the Rock Creek, from the trail, from the regional trail, where everybody passes through. So there's the impact on the park itself. There's the impact on the fields, and Patrick would be better able to answer that if he's looked closely at it. But if you look at the space, let's take, I know you've said maybe 2 or 3 courts, what's being considered, but there's another issue there. But, you know, to keep it simple, 4 courts would take up 100 by 200 feet. An area 200 feet long, 100 feet wide would fit 4 pickleball courts. So pickleball court essentially is 20 by 44, and it takes 30 by 60 feet. So you fit 4 in a 100 by 200 foot area. So I know maybe you only do 3, but certainly if you take 4, there's no way you can put it in there without impinging significantly on the multi-purpose fields. And even if you minimize that or only have 3 courts, you've got the fields right there. Kids use that when they're playing. Those fields are crowded when parents and kids are there. They may be over practicing or kicking the ball around and that kind of thing. So I think I would be concerned about its impact on the existing multi-purpose fields in the park. And then there's parking. I left today. There was practicing, as there is this time, most days of the week, this time of the year, and for much of the year. There's soccer practice going on in those very multi-purpose fields. All of the parking is taken up. There are 19 spaces. There are more than 19 cars there right now. So at a prime time for pickleball use, people come home from work, they're going to want to go over and play pickleball, you're not going to have parking. And parking's going to be a problem. But not only that, I don't know if you were to design an ideal location or set criteria for an ideal location for a pickleball court, and certainly look at other pickleball court arrangements around the area, which I've done. Parking is pretty critical. People want to park fairly close. And it's just not ideal to have the parking so far away and have to walk through the park to get to a court. But not only that, much of the prime time, there will not be adequate parking in that location. So I ask you to consider that. But then there's the other alternatives. Now, I don't know why Autry Park has not been more seriously and thoroughly looked at. And talking to people and talking to some of the trustees, it's not something that I get things like, well, we didn't think there was enough space, or we're afraid it would conflict with disc golf. Well, none of those things is true. And there's plenty of room to put pickleball. You could put pickleball, and you could put 8 courts in the area right over the bridge. As you come over the bridge from parking in Autry and you veer immediately to the right, you could put easily 8 pickleball courts there and have more than enough room for the skate park facility you're talking about, and still leave more than half of that area for I don't know if this is working, but more than half of that area for so see this area right here that's conveniently colored in all of these Google Maps right now? That is 100 by 200 feet. 4 pickleball courts right there, easily. And that still leaves all of this space, which is, if you tripled or quadrupled the current skate park facility, you would have plenty of room to put a nice skate park in there. And that's still not even, that's still leaving all of this other area here. Lost it. This other area here. You still have this whole central area, which is what that was intended to be left for, was for future amenities exactly like this. The disc golf is.
You just put it.
Oh, there. Oh, I see. I'm sorry. The disc golf, all is over here it does not go into this area. It was intentionally left, this area was intentionally left for exactly this kind of future additional facilities or amenities. So right now you've got parking right there. You come around the oval, which is what it was designed for. It kind of separates people from the different facilities. You go right over the bridge, and there's your pickleball. Now the other advantage of this is that this is closely equidistant from the homes that are involved. The single-family residences here on Reliance Circle, the Saddlebrook community, and the Bell Flatirons. You're pretty much as far away from them and equidistant from them as you can get. But it's farther than any place else you can build this in town. You're about 400 feet from my house, for example. You'd be approximately 400 feet from the Topaz Street homes over on Community Park. This is 500 or 600, maybe more in some cases, feet, which is an important addition in terms of distance, and shouldn't pose. If there's a problem there, then there's no place in town you can build it if it's a problem with noise. But there's your most likely location to be free of the noise complaint.
Jim,
Now-
could you try to wrap it up?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So I just would hope that there's a thorough examination of this, and of course there needs to be public process for community involvement. If we're talking about this location was not, Community Park location was not included in the original outreach. So that's something that would need to be looked at again if you're going to seriously pursue that route. Okay,
All right. Thank you.
thank you.
Do we have any other public comment on pickleball? Okay. So, like I said, we last month we had our discussion. We were going to leave it to this meeting to make a recommendation to the board. So I think it's probably best just to go one by one, see what people's thoughts are at this point. You can make comments on pickleball in general or on location. Ultimately, we're trying to make a recommendation on location tonight. So I don't know if Ron, you want to start?
Sure. No, I agree with a lot of what Jim was saying. Not been a fan of Safeway or Community Park since it came up. Still think the most quickest and effective is Founders. As far as if we want to get it done under the budget that guidelines they've given us, but definitely an interesting concept over at Autry Park that may want to look at. I know if I'm following what we're supposed to be doing here, they're looking for us to give them, this is our spot, we're picking this spot. So under that context, it's going to be a challenge for us to come up with one spot that we all agree on, I think. So
My comment is, I think public comment had a lot of valid points, valid concerns with the community park location. That being said, I think it makes a lot of sense to do some more analysis on Autry Park and then comparing that to community park, just to get a perspective of pros and cons of each location. So yeah, basically I think it makes sense to look into the Autry Park location a little deeper. And that's my comment.
Jacques, what do you feel like, what more do you need to know about Autry Park to not make a decision about it tonight?
So one thing would be the location itself, size-wise. Does it have the same size potential in terms of 4 pickleball courts as community park?
Patrick, are you able to
I'm not sure about that.
answer that question definitively?
So that would be the first thing, right? Just for an apples to apples comparison, right? Second thing would be proximity to homes. So I think that is a valid point that, 400 feet versus 600 feet, for example, is 50%.
Can you show both sides? Can you leave me and Audrey at the same time? Keep going. Sorry.
Sure. Yeah. So it looks like the proximity to homes is about 50% further at Autry Park, but having some real numbers on that would be great. I think that way we know if we're talking 500 versus 600 feet, or if we're talking 400 feet versus 700 feet, just to really understand what that difference is. And then the third thing would be soil. I know soil has been a big conversation about selecting a location. I don't think that should be the driving factor, but it's a factor. So if we are aware of any previous or existing soil issues, I think that needs to be taken into account, because that could easily triple the project costs. So I think that's a factor. But yeah, I mean, just a little more discussion around the actual the actual data of Autry Park versus
So,
community park.
Patrick, other than soil, are you able to answer the distance from homes for both locations and the size available for courts at both locations?
Yeah, try.
It looks about the same distance.
I think to piggyback on that question, what your thought was, that again, you also got to figure out what's going to happen with disc golf. Is it going to expand? Is it going to go away? And then the concept that we discussed with the skate park. How would that affect? Would that adversely affect putting a skate park there if that turns to be the best location for a skate park? And just off the top of my head, is it something that might be even more financially viable to do it all at once, if there's enough room to put both the skate park? You're bringing in all the construction equipment at one time, one area. Again, I just thought of that, like maybe that would help
Put a
save
pool.
some money. Yeah, pool your resources to do one project for
not a pool.
two potential options.
So pickleball and skate park at Autry?
Yeah, it would have fit. That's a problem. We don't know if
You would probably have two different contractors in those projects, but there might be
Well,
some
maybe not for
shared
soil preparation, though.
infrastructure.
Well, if you're doing any soil preparation, that's where it's going to
Right.
really benefit, because you just do it once for the whole area.
It's your mass grading.
All right, so just for a little bit of context, this is the current striping for soccer. Right? This is kind of, you can kind of see the wear patterns. This is generally what we're talking about for soccer. Just kind of a quick refresher. Opportunity we were looking is this nook here, right? So. Kind of 5-ish. 4. Depending on, obviously that skews a little bit if you go towards the corner, but you're in that range. I think when we initially measured it, we were probably, kind of scroll back in.
You're not doing it from the edge, you're doing it from the center.
You're doing it from the
edge.
center, yeah.
With
So you assume probably edge somewhere in here. That probably put you at like 460, somewhere in there. So you've got that.
Can you, yeah.
Probably pretty comparable. A little bit, you're getting definitely farther. Your closest would be corner lot. You've got you've got the hillside grade. This is a little more valleyed out.
But basically,
Those are-
at least 450
Those
for
are a couple
both
of apartments
locations.
rather than the number of single-family homes.
And then just kind of for a quick perspective, here you're,
500 feet across.
yeah.
450.
And then you're probably, you know, and just in our initial conversation between staff and the skate park design, you know, we were initially looking at probably, you know, something in this area. The whole area is a floodway, right? So it doesn't, and actually the floodway comes all the way up here. So in terms of, you know, regulations, it doesn't matter if it's here or if it's here. We still have to kind of play by the same rules. You know,
Why wouldn't you just mirror it to the bike park?
well, so you know, and that's a good question. And I've shared this with you guys. You know, staff still gets, we get probably more requests to add on to bike park than we do. I mean, it's up there with skate park. From a master planning perspective, and I've actually asked a couple of colleagues who I know really well to just look at this. If we were to ever try to bring this the bike park over, there is a good synergy between this corridor here and potentially accessing this hillside. You know, now, again, I think to all your guys' point about master planning, I don't want to put something in which automatically eliminates something which may be a need, right? We've heard that there's definitely a desire for additional bike park features. This hillside, I think, you know, we went through the process and eliminated Coyote Ridge. We heard loud and clear, hey, leave it as is. Don't do anything to it. You do have some opportunities with this grade here and using kind of these water features to maybe do something. So, and then from a visibility standpoint, you don't have a great view corridor here. You know, I was looking at some road shots of, you know, my preference if we do the skate park over here is that our sheriff's department can at least make a pass down here and say, okay, do we have kids over there? Is it past curfew? You know, that's one of the things that we've had conversations of here is, you know, we know that there's a lot of activity that takes place down at the bike park at night. And it's actually really walled off by trees. So trying to create another feature, but making sure that it's maybe a little more visible. So we started to kind of lean it over this way a little bit.
Can I make a comment on the bike park, Patrick?
Yeah.
History.
You want me to go back to that?
No, where you just had it. Yeah. Originally, when the park was designed and Lee Hamilton designed the park, it was phase 2 was to be over here, and at some point he even have a bridge over. So this was supposed to be phase 2 of Lee Hamilton's original design, and he was excited about that because it had a lot of it had the features and the hill and the elevation that would really work for him. And that's also very much in view of the sheriff and the street.
Corey, thoughts?
We can go back to just both. I mean, I think one of our key things that continues to come up is we talk about all these amenities and adding them into places, and we put one in one place because we want something else in the other place, and there may be swap of those amenities, and that's where, you know, we keep coming back to the master plan, because to me it's kind of the road, the guide to get you there. And honestly, for me, the community park is the central spline of activity in the community, with the soccer fields, the turf field, the outdoor multi-purpose, the kids play area, the basketball court. So I mean, you know, that's one of the pieces I think that has a draw with community park. And yes, there's passive and active spaces, but I think the whole space has a little bit of balance. The the concern I have with the corner is just that we've talked about it before, is that, we maintain as much multi-surface playing field as possible. But I think that back corner, from being out there with many soccer practices and games and things like that back corner isn't as highly utilized. I think that you are still, no matter where we put pickleball, there's a concern of the high pitch ping that comes off of that. The basketball court is nearby, and it's even closer to homes, but that has a dull kind of don't. So I mean, there's differences, but you still have active activities in that range, in that community park space. I think that's one of the things we talked about at the dinner, was that anywhere we put the pickleball, we're fitting it into the existing park structure that we already have, and it's going to be within a certain distance of homes, and it's one of our main concerns about impacting the homes adjacent to a space that's already been developed. And I think even Community Park is developed, Autry Park was developed after it, but it's still, proximity-wise, appears to be the same. Or similar distances, not the exact same, but similar. I think as we continue to look at the overall picture here, the skate park and the bike park has some ties with being able to ride a dirt bike and take it over and ride it on the skate park, but it all comes down to size and how the bike park is created, because if you have a little bowl that's the size of this room, you're going to get 15 people standing on the edge waiting to do their thing. And I just want to make sure it's sized appropriately. Also, at Autry Park, there's a lot more room for expansion for the bike park and the skate park, if it's there, but we have to build that in as an understanding of master plan, just as Jim said, with the bike park moving potentially west instead of east. That's another option, but again, to me, it'd be great to tie it into some of the existing trails out there, and if there's a increased amount of trails that could be just single track. I know that I rather enjoy riding over there, and if we can improve the disc golf and get a little bike activity, trails and things like that around there that don't interfere with each other, there's a lot of components and a lot of things that could be done at Autry Park, but I don't want one to all of a sudden, we have a pickleball court, it interferes with the skate park, it interferes with the future bike park. How does it all work together? And I think we need to just understand how big each one is, and is there space for each one out there, and can we move forward with it? I think one of the things we were tasked with is to provide a location that fits within the fabric and can be done soon. And I continue to go back to Town 15 as a very large piece of land, lots of space around it, that you could put a lot of racket, pickleball, tennis. There's all kinds of things that could go in there, but that's outside the purview of what we have to work with. So working with what's in the community parks, or the town's park system, I think Founders was a great opportunity in the fact that it is flat prepped and could be installed. Community has that same components, and I think Autry, in looking at that location over there, if we can put the bike park, skate park, and pickleball in the same zone and work to be able to, if pickleball becomes really popular and 4 courts isn't enough, is there expansion for another 2? Is there expansion for another 3? And do we have that availability? I think that access-wise, getting to pickleball, it is more of a potential drive to with a parking lot, and either one is about the same walk from Autry's parking or Community Park's parking.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit longer. I don't know. I've ridden it a bunch. I've never walked to the bike park. But anyway, I think that there's some similarities, and it's just a matter of how we work them together. And that's my biggest concern is, can we work them all together, and is it going to improve and get done in a year? Because that's what our task was. So I'm sure I could go on for more, but I threw a lot out there.
I agree with the master planning, just to comment real quick. And I think I might be wrong, but I think the parking at Autry, I think there's more spaces there than Community Park.
Yeah, so in our skate park discussions, that did kind of open the door for parking discussions, and you do have a couple to Jim's earlier comment, and this was reiterated by Assistant Town Manager Martin Toth, who at the time was the Parks and Rec Director. Opportunity here, right? This actually kind of gets used, but definitely a parking opportunity. You also have an opportunity to do head-in parking down here. So to that master planning point, even if pickleball weren't an option, parking is going to have to be analyzed, because we know that this is an incredibly popular amenity, and then at times we're backlogged with vehicles trying to get into the Yardway site, and this actually doesn't have the latest.
Another thing I want to point out too is whatever we do at Autry, we're going to have to add concrete path.
Yeah.
That the crusher fines aren't going to work for kids on scooters and skateboards and to get to the skate park. And to me, the skate park is a little kind of out of the way at Autry, but it is ties to the bike park, and the bike park's a little more accessible on a bike, but kids on scooters, you need to get them to that point. So that's a strip of concrete pavement that really should go on our 5-year trails plan, but it really should tie to the amenity of an upgrade to the trails over there to make sure the accessibility is there for activity.
Well, and to that point, Corey, separate even from, like I said, separate from pickleball. That conversation's been had as
Pickleball
well.
or skate park. I mean,
Yeah, because
I think
and that
pickleball
was
would be walking
right.
the crushers.
So
To keep
that you're
points
right.
clean.
That would come in with the skate park project, is the upgrade on the to concrete.
Right. I know that how many times we talk about trails and how much concrete trails are. It just adds to the cost of the amenity. So I mean, just
I will say that the town certainly always turns to concrete, but there's nothing to say you can't do asphalt, especially in areas that are a little bit more native to their edges.
Mm-hmm.
There's plenty of communities that do asphalt trail paths instead of.
Well, I think one of the amenities on the bike, the skate park, was an asphalt trail around it that had the rollers and things like
You're
that.
right. Yeah, the asphalt pump
Because there
track.
was a concrete element, but then an asphalt element, so there's a little variation in elements as well within the skate park.
Yeah.
But we can talk about this.
Sorry.
We're going to talk about the skate park next, so we can have that discussion a little bit further.
We are.
Narita, thoughts
Okay,
on pickleball?
pickleball. Community park, I know Corey was saying that it's like a central part, central piece of different activities. Now, I think community park has like 2 different areas. It has the part with most activity, and it has this other part. I've spent a lot of hours there with my kids' sports, with the playground, and now I spend more time kind of like maybe running or walking around on the other side. And I'm with Jim Payne that it's kind of a quiet part of the park. And one thing that I was thinking, I didn't think about this before, but I was thinking about this a couple of days ago, is how the noise of the pop-up is going to impact all that wildlife that is on the other side of the trail, because that's a very nice area. There's also like benches to sit there and observe. I'm not too much of an observer of wildlife, but I know there's people that do.
It's the same creek in Autry. It goes all the way.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm
It
not
is
so
the
familiar with Autry.
same
Same
corridor.
Okay.
I mean, it's not exactly, that section of the creek, if you could show, where are we? If you could show the,
That's all wild grasses and.
It has that rock fall.
yeah,
at
so
the top.
this part of the creek is not the forested part. It's there are different parts of the creek.
Here, Jim.
This was
Yeah. So you
I'm
see it's
looking
a
for the-
little more scrub.
right, but
You're
I'm saying the restored part, the protected part that was restored at great expense by urban drainage is further along down from the dog park. So has generally been considered a protected area, as is sort of the part behind the ball fields. But other sections of it are not quite as critical in terms of wildlife.
I understand with the amount of vegetation
That's
around
right,
the
it's
creek.
same creek.
Right.
Okay.
Sorry, keep
One
going.
more thing about the community park. In my opinion, the not having a lot of parking it might not be a bad idea because, as we have seen in the tennis courts, there's constantly people from outside Superior that come and uses the court. So maybe if we don't have too much parking, maybe it's more for residents, and maybe even we encourage people to walk or bike or something more. But that's my opinion. That doesn't have to be anyone's opinion. Autry Park, I think it may be a good option. The only thing, I'm not so familiar with Autry Park other than the bike park, but it seems to me that maybe we should think more of like the whole thing. What are we gonna do here? More than just saying, okay, we put this here and that, and it seems that there's a big area, kind of like when we talk about the Richmond or Town 15 or whatever that corner is called, that maybe we want to plan a little bit more. Other than that, it might be a good option, and I think you all know that I'm a bit concerned about the crowd that uses the skate park, so having the pickleball courts there might be better because there's more people and maybe somehow more control. And in looking at the big picture, probably if we need to build something quick and now and we want to do it now, probably Founders Park seems like the best option from my perspective. And also I think that the pickleball maybe fits more in in Founders Park because it's more like people passes by, there's shopping center, the other two areas seem to be a little bit more natural. That's my opinion.
Is that hole one too where your hand is? Is that what hole one is? Or
There's the
goal is?
practice hole. It's over here. T pad 1's right here.
Yeah, okay, so I thought, okay, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, but yeah, I think you can probably see practice basket there.
All right, here I go. Autry Park and Town 15 have some similarity. They're both blank canvases, really, for us to do what we want to do, and it has the prime opportunity to do a master plan of amenities in those areas. As soon as you put something in, you ruin your blank canvas if you don't have the bigger picture in mind of how everything else is going to go around it and affect it. So I would not be in favor of doing anything in Autry until we had first had a bigger discussion of what is Autry going to look like, what do we want to do with it, how does this whole thing go, because I don't want to, tie my hands before I have the opportunity to understand what I am able to do. And I would have the same argument with Town 15. I think you guys understand that I'm kind of this whole pickleball thing in general. I still think we need to have I would love to have a bigger discussion on where it fits into the overall amenities and overall master plan. I understand we've communicated that, and I understand that they've asked us for a location, so I'm willing to acquiesce and say, okay, well, if I was going to put it, where would I put it? So going back to what Jim said, what are the criteria of a pickleball, right? Well, obviously you have to have a certain space. You want to have so much of a distance away. You want to have parking. I think we can check off all these criteria in many of these parks we have, and I think we're meeting them. There is the noise criteria, but I think there's also some dampeners you can do when you put the courts up and you put some blockage, maybe in foliage. There's ways to reduce that sound, and I heard the video that you guys did of what the sound sounds like, and that was with nothing there, right? When they were just hitting it back and forth. Now, it wasn't a professional mic; it was a camera. I take that with a grain of salt, but by the same token, I understand what you guys were trying to do. Looking at the bigger picture in my mind, I have a bunch of notes here, sorry. That whole community park area, right? It's football and field hockey and lacrosse and baseball and actual active sports where kids there and soccer and all of these things are active sports where people are there all the time. And you go on a weekend, it's just filled with a sport type thing on that whole corridor. Yeah, there is a playground right there, but it's a sport thing. Pickleball is a sport thing, It fits totally in line with everything else in there because it's a sport. And It's a throw, where you throw, hit, kick, whatever, it all fits in that area, right? So, plus, I'm also in favor of, if we're talking about piecemealing amenities, again, going back to that blank canvas, I would always be in favor of putting a piecemeal amenity into something that's already anchored by something else that's already established, because you're not taking away your blank canvas, you're not taking away what it could be. You already know what it is, and you're putting it in there saying, yeah, it'll fit in here, right? And so, given all these things, by the way, tying into what you're saying with the trail, we have talked about maybe making the trail over by Autry, tying it into the 36 bikeway, right? That was one of the things we've talked about and how all that plays together. But again, that goes back into understanding the master plan, right?
Yeah, and that was a concrete versus
Right.
pressure fine.
But
'Cause there's
it's still
one-
part of the bigger picture. So I can filibuster all day if I really wanted to. But given all that, and if we're trying to make a decision tonight, I think, to me, the place where it fits the best, where it makes the most sense, is community, given what I've already said. That's my take tonight. If I have more time to evaluate and look at a bigger thing, I could probably change my mind. But tonight, that's my decision.
Can you pull up Founders?
So I mean, as far as the general pickleball conversation, I think, we could all argue whether amenities are of higher priority to us, but given the fact that we have the budget for pickleball, it has been on our radar for several years. We have the opportunity to do it this year for a relatively reasonable amount of money versus the other amenities that are at the top of the list. I don't really feel like we should waste the breath at this point on discussing whether pickleball should happen or not. I think we just kind of, as Corbett said, just kind of roll over. Let's focus on location. As far as location, Founders has, the everything there to support a pickleball court: restroom, parking, everything. If it were on the east side of the park, I would be much more in favor of it. The location that was proposed on the west side of the park eliminates.
We were right here.
Right there.
I thought it was on the west side of the. I thought we couldn't do it there because of an irrigation line, and the location in the public engagement was to the west side of the playground.
It was, okay, yeah, so it largely undefined, you can put it here. We did the sound test, tucked in.
Well,
here.
so if you put
either-
it there, on east of the playground,
Next to the basketball court.
next to the basketball court,
I mean,
I could see it. If you put it west of the playground, you're eliminating a highly used field.
totally agree.
And
Absolutely.
it's to me, you're removing an active use area more than any other location we're talking about, including community park.
And just for giggles, how close is it to that house?
It's exactly what I was going to ask. Cool.
Your closest one, yeah.
So assuming it goes on that side of the basketball court.
Hold on,
Is that a comparable
going.
size?
Yeah, measure
Keep
it. I'm
going,
going to keep
talking
going.
while-
White Raven, I think, is a missed opportunity to do something. At this point, I think pickleball's probably not the right one, given it's probably the closest to homes. Even though it's only a few homes, it's probably closer than 450 feet that, the other locations we're talking about. And I think it only makes sense to do something on White Raven and East Yarrow when you're doing the White Raven Street project. The whole economies of scale thing, I think, it only works that way. So that basically comes back to Autry and community. I'm completely in agreement that Autry is basically a blank canvas if we're talking about new amenities, and especially if we're talking about disc golf going away, which is a much larger conversation, which is not going to happen in the time frame that we're talking about. So I think that we can put one amenity in Autry without being too disruptive. We cannot put two at the same time without basically eliminating future opportunities. And so I'm favoring skate park for Autry over pickleball, which basically comes down to community then. I understand all the concerns over that have been expressed. I feel like the distance is at least 450 feet from any home. It is an active use park. As much as we might look at it as passive, if you walked out there right now, it's heavily used year-round for team sports. So there's certainly large chunks of a week where there is a lot of noise out there that's going to be much louder than pickleball, that's going to use much more parking than pickleball. So these things like, oh, there's not enough parking, most of the time there's plenty of parking. When it's competing with the sports, okay, maybe you park over by Safeway rather than park by the basketball court. The basketball court, if you want to talk about amenities close to homes, the basketball court's right there along homes, and I don't hear complaints about the basketball court.
Well, everybody
The
has
tennis
a
courts are right
basketball
along
court.
homes. I don't hear about complaints from noise from tennis courts. So I think that it's, given the process of elimination, it is the best site.
Could I just stress the basketball court issue?
Sure.
Basketball court is a different thing. You've got basketball on you, and every street, every house has basketball out front.
It's a repetitive noise, though.
Right, but it's not as loud, and that's pickup basketball. That's one or two people at a time. It's used a lot, but you don't have games and teams and competition, but you've got usually a dad and his kid or daughter and a couple of kids shooting hoops, and it's limited times during the day. I mean, I guess I think you all understand what's going on with pickleball and how big this sport is.
Well, that's why.
And to put in 3 courts with no room for expansion, because you're not going to get a 4th court in there without really cutting into the fields. You're putting it in a place where you have no room to expand. Have you asked the pickleball community? I mean, what are they saying about it? They want that location over Autry?
They want courts regardless of location, is what I've heard.
Right, but what are the criteria that are
actually-
important to them?
I actually like the idea that we're limited to 2 to 3 courts, and we're not going to be attracting competitions, large numbers of outside of town players. To Naria's point, the fact that maybe it isn't the most easily accessible and the largest complex of courts is actually a good thing for this community. And
Okay,
not a negative.
That was the exact same thing was said about the bike park, and now you're trying to expand that. The exact same thing was said about disc golf. Oh, we don't want more than 9 holes. We don't want to make it any bigger because then we're going to attract tournaments. We're going to attract people from other places. Even though the very popular Interlaken disc golf course is smaller than ours, and people love it. But now you're looking at now there's talk about expanding that. Expanding the bike park, expanding the dog park. All of those said the exact same thing, Peter.
Just
So
a quick
you're
comment.
going to get the same thing on pickleball, and you're going to get a lot more people pushing you to expand the pickleball than the others.
Quick comment on the expansion topic. I kind of see pickleball as tennis. I think it would make a lot of sense if the time comes that we need to, double pickleball capacity to have a different location, just like you have different locations for tennis. So I think that's not a concern to me, the expansion opportunity at any specific site, because I think it would actually be a good thing to have, 2, for when the time comes, pickleball courts at different locations than like a big cluster of pickleball. To kind of, also from a location perspective, convenience perspective, you're providing opportunities, just like tennis, to different parts of Rock Creek and different parts of Superior, so that, again, it's not just clustered in one location. Now, some amenities you can't do that with, but pools are an example, tennis courts are an example, and I think pickleball is kind of in that same category. So for me, expansion's not a real big consideration for the location.
Well, and I'm just going to throw in also, I mean, for me, it comes down to master plan and parks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the new town center, and saying at some point those West community fields, hopefully, because they've been on our list to actually fix to make them actual fields. that are, with the correct grass, mowed to the correct length, utilized a little bit more, drainage correctly. And so, to some extent, when they get the fields across the way, hopefully there will be some utilization of the open play fields, the new turf field across the street, all those kind of things. So there's also a master plan of the entire town, and saying, if we take that one corner in Community Park, I think that the pickleball fits for a certain amount of courts and still have the opportunity for the multi-use where it is shown as you can see in the Google images. If we put it over here, my biggest thing is if I put something in there, I really want to just understand where the skate park and if the pickleball fits in there and how it works with everything else. We've talked a lot about the, not expansion, but just upgrade of the disc golf, because I think that's why people don't use it. We have a great successful tournament that is hosted at Purple Park that's a temporary location that they put up holes and take down. And if we could just make this more of a maintained, manicured, a little more maintenance friendly, that's not as much scrub planting, I think that it'd become even more an attractive amenity without changing the footprint of it, just changing the actual utilization of it.
So really quick,
Sorry,
it's all good. So just as reference, right? So if hypothetically, if we were to adopt Louisville Skate Park, which is a large skate park,
right,
far exceeds our budget,
okay,
even if we were to increase the budget. You're at 140 some feet by 65 feet. So if we were to kind of rectangle this off or contour it and
yeah,
look at a footprint, so you assume, all right, maybe this is generally skate park. And actually, if we wanted to, we can.
And that's where you're basically going to a master plan to say, if I put these 2-3 amenities in there, do I still have space? And do I still have some open space around them and breathing room between pickleball and the skate park? And if we wanted to expand, or if you wanted to leave it green space, you can do that around the bike park or other amenities.
Or maybe yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying. I don't think fit is I don't think fit is something that's been on staff's radar.
Well, and just seeing how they lay out in there.
What do you mean, fit of skate park
Size
or
and-
both
You've
skate
got
park and pickleball?
Yeah, I think you could fit a lot of stuff down here. And when we were looking, I'm going to say, I don't remember, 2 years ago, we had even, if I remember going through my notes, we'd laid out some soccer fields down here. So fit, I don't think is an issue, because I don't remember exactly what we said pickleball would be, but
That gray area is 100 feet by 200 feet.
The
Right.
darker green.
This is 100, 200 by 100, 4 courts. 200 by 100.
Peter, when is the recommendation due? And I ask because do we have the opportunity to do a little bit of a master plan for Autry Park to kind of answer the concerns about the pickleball court stepping on other projects?
you have more flexibility with, so skate park's going in here.
Right.
That's happening. From staff's perspective, I've mentioned to my boss, all I'm doing is just burning through the budget, and I'm wasting my time, and I'm wasting the project budget. And if that means we pump the brakes, I'm fully supportive of a master plan, just because we also have a floodplain down there. There are parking issues down there. I think it's an opportunity that if we're going to start adding amenities here, it's got to be right.
And that's
And it starts with skate park. So I think that, so just to be transparent with you guys, the skate park's happening. That's going. I'll bring a design forward with you guys. I don't think I'll be honest, even if we were to increase the budget by $100,000 and get it to like $450, or even push it to $500,000, I don't think that we're, with site prep, gonna get anything near this size. I think that we do now play the game a little bit of, we're in a floodplain. There are site conditions that are completely unique to being in a floodplain. I think the board will say, hey, we'll give you some money, but we're also not going to be able to blow the top off this thing and all of a sudden jump it from 350 to like 6 or 7. We just don't have that kind of money. So I think that, you know, proceeding with some kind of plan, knowing that somewhere generally in this area, and I'm completely, you know, just because we, for initial conversation, dropped it here does not by any stretch mean that's where it needs to stay. So in my opinion, and conversations with the manager, I do think there's a little bit more time on pickleball. With that being said, it's not guaranteed that that money will be in the budget past this year. I think there are various stages of a master plan. There's some charrette stuff that's probably pretty cheap, quick and easy that can go through. You know, we're already currently working on trying to bring an irrigation system over. I know that that's been a hot topic. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think you have a little bit more leeway on pickleball court as long as we're all on the same page that skate parks taking off.
I mean, I think there's at least, you know, a couple board members who at this point want to see a pickleball location picked yesterday so that ground can be broken tomorrow and the courts are being able to be used in warm weather months. That said, that's not necessarily the majority of the board would agree with that. I can't say, but I'm not going to put words in their mouth. So Patrick might be right. We could have more time with pickleball, but I certainly think that the general idea was that we make a recommendation on both skate park, although that one's pretty much made. We'll discuss it next, but it's pretty much made. And pickleball this month, at latest next month, so that those projects can proceed.
Well,
Okay, thank you.
yeah. And I'd just say that, you know, the skate park location size, it could be a phase 1, phase 2. I deal with phase projects all the time. That if you build a part, then you can add a part if you have, you know, some money in a couple years. And that's where just having that understanding of it's going to fit within the zone and still allow for pickleball. And I know that I'm hearing the same thing on skate park, that it's like, well, it's been closed for a year now, and why haven't we got it back up and running? So there's a lot of people want all these amenities, and we need to push to try and solidify a location. I think Orchard Park and Community Park, you know, they're both good, viable options, but we need to pick one because the board's also saying, well, in order to get a contractor on board, somebody to start building it, get it built, you know, they want to see, hey, can I get it done before the end of the summer? Because by the time we're done with our process, we won't be able to break ground and it'll be built by October, right when it snows, November or December, you know? And everyone will say, well, no, I can't use it. So I think that's another big push to try and solidify a location so that they can utilize the money in the budget this year and get it open for use.
I
And
can
think that
almost,
there's a lot of requests for both activities.
yeah, I could say with almost certainty that neither one, you're not using either one this year. I mean, skate park design, I mean, we're in a floodway. You know, that with a bid process where you're maybe starting construction by June or July. And then, you know, pickleball. Now, I will say, pickleball can be built quick. If you guys remember how quickly.
If you put it in Founders, you could get it done in a couple
yeah,
months.
you could. I mean, I'm not.
And Community Park in the location it is, that you could probably get done pretty quickly too.
And pickleball is much easier. Look, at either location, so in the back, either location's in the floodway. So we're facing, now you can do that, right? And pickleball is much, much easier. Soil's good, we're going down, we'll probably do 8-inch.
You just put some concrete down here.
Yep, and a fence. Skate park, completely different, especially because we are creating a rise in the floodway, assuming
to
we
do
do
more
kind of
earthwork.
rollers. It'll be a very similar process to the process we went through here, but it just is a little bit longer. So that's where I think hopefully adding some amenities back up by the south pool kind of helps. You know, I don't think we're ever good at actually tempering people's expectations. And I know that that's really, really hard to do, and people don't necessarily want to hear that at all. But, you know, it's better to do things, I think, right than to rush. I think there's some validity in master planning at whatever location. I do think, you know, if Community Park is still an option, and Founders Park, I think that we have to do more public engagement, absolutely. So.
Yeah, that's the one point I was gonna, the board did direct that if the committee looks at Community Park, there does need to be some community engagement on it, because it has not been discussed. And so that would be my only caution to you, is that you make sure if you move in that direction, that you at least, I don't know, at least allow the community to give some feedback on it.
A quick comment on Founders Park. If sound is a factor, I made a quick note, minimum distance to a residence there is 250 feet. That's less than
300. It was
300? 310? Okay.
But
From-
it's still less.
That's still too close to say.
But that's roughly, 40%, 30% closer than the other two options. So in my mind, that's a...
Off the table.
Yeah, that's a problematic
But
location.
this
If
is a
sound
little
is...
more, you got a parking, you got a lot of,
Right.
a lot of traffic
Yeah,
going
there's
on
more
back there.
activity.
That's
It's
true.
more- It's more
So
noisy.
you've already got noise, basketball, you've already got the fields. I'm just.
Yeah, no, that's true.
The activity
It's a good
level,
point.
the
The
traffic
road
level
and
is a lot higher.
I think
And that
all in
doesn't
all,
stop at 5.
it's
True,
been a
okay.
good
Going
discussion.
from
I think it's
nine.
been a great discussion from my seat. And I'll just throw one thing out there. My against Community Park has got to do with only one thing and one thing only. It's, we don't have enough fields as it is. And I don't understand why would you even consider cutting off a field to put a pickleball court in. That's it. It's the only thing I'm against it. And I would never support it, just because of that. Until we say, oh, we got 4 more fields going, and maybe I'd think about it. But the fact of the matter is, we're limited on where we put fields. And as you said,
That
if
we're
start
not
watering,
guaranteed
we change the
next-
grass around, next thing you know, that's
Right.
more active, who knows? And I'm just saying, I don't think we should in any way, shape, or form take away fields. So, that's my opinion.
And it's a different look also. It's like you said, it's the soccer fields, and then you're gonna put the fences and the concrete.
And I think people use it more than, I mean, there's obviously the involvement with the Y, and who's ever using it these days for soccer out there. I think it's through, Boulder.
SC Boulder
Yeah,
used
Boulder.
it, yeah.
But there's also people out there all the time, just laying around doing things as well, when there's no activities going
Yeah.
on, throwing a frisbee. So, again, that's just my opinion, so.
All right, we do need to wrap this up.
Okay,
So
one quick
are
comment.
we-
Can I
Are
make
we
it?
prepared to make a recommendation, or do we have to hold another public engagement?
Well, I think this is what I was just gonna say in my comment, that I think that even by making our recommendation, where if we do recommend Community Park, that we include in there, we recommend this, but this is going to force that we really need to do a community involvement or community feedback to see and how they feel about this location, right? It doesn't mean that we were saying it goes there and let's not reach out to the community. It's saying, hey, we're thinking this is the best place for it to go. Now we need to do the next step and reach out to the community and see how they feel about this. And if we get really a lot of feedback, then we have to maybe go back to the drawing board and look at another location, right? But
I'm gonna throw out there, I'm extremely torn, because I think the directive we were given was find a place to put it in next year. And the only place I see that I can put it in next year is Community Park. Autry Park, yeah, I think it works, but you can't do it this year. And it takes, to me, a master plan to really understand the space, because there's too many variables over there to just throw something in. That's my big issue with it.
That's where
I'm-
Founders
and
comes, that's where
I
Founders
just-
comes into
I am
play
more of a-
as a viable option, because it can be put in right away.
Right,
If we
and
can
that's
use
why
the spot.
why it was on the list in the first place.
Right. I know.
And to me, I'm just more of a planner. I like to understand how the full space works. Community Park has a full space that you're fitting into a corner. I totally agree with you about taking away fields. I know it's an underutilized portion of the field, But on the other hand, you are taking away open green space in a field setting. That yes, throwing a frisbee, running a dog, you know, those kind of things, that is an opportunity that we're
No
taking
dogs,
away.
there's no dogs there, never. Just kidding.
Dog on leash right there. But the fact is, that's where I'm extremely torn, because the recommendation is, or the directive is to provide a place that we can put it in right away. And I do not think Autry is a place I can put it in right away. If we have time to look at putting the skate park and making sure we can kind of coordinate the other amenities that are potential in that location. And to me, I want to see a phase 1, phase 2 of if I can add 5 more courts or 4 more courts and a little bit more skate park and still have good utilization out there. I mean, I don't know how many we're going to put in, but with the popularity, even Jim has stated that it's such a popular activity that 4 courts may be, oh, we're still packed and we want to add more. And like you said, is it 4 more there or 4 more in a different park? And we're having a hard enough time finding a location in one park.
Have you done soil down there?
We haven't done, so like I said, at this point,
At Autry?
I'm just, no, we've burned through, I'm burning through budget unnecessarily. So
wheels.
I think we're kind of at that point, like, we're full head of steam on skate park. I did know, you know, I think at least 3, if not more, have mentioned a master planning process, and I do think that that's actually an okay response from staff's perspective, right? We're likely to request that anyway down here.
To me, if you,
I don't, you know, maybe it's a matter of trying to get a little bit more information on timing. You know, but we're doing some irrigation work, so we're kind of starting to draw out irrigation. We're going to work on a parking plan. You know, does it make sense for us to try to pencil in and say, hey, we also want, as you're looking at it, to figure out, does this footprint for courts make sense? I think that's probably an easy add for us to do in the work that we're doing now. But you're right, Corey, to your point, and Peter mentioned it early. We heard it during your work plan. We heard it during the budget. We heard it during the work plan. We've heard it during the meeting that this needs to get in, and needs to get in ASAP. The pickleball courts. So, you know, I appreciate the spot that you guys are in. This is a difficult spot to be in.
Was anyone prepared to make a recommendation?
I mean,
Just as a hypothetical, throw it out there, do we need to put a motion up there? See what if it say it gets
That's what I
voted
mean.
down?
Is
Just
anyone
say all
prepared
of
to
them
to
down,
spit out a motion,
then we'll know that the
or are we
get
going
the
to
message.
table it again? That's what.
I don't know, I guess, does any one location have enough? to get
And I don't know that, you
We
know,
need 4 to pass.
I don't know that tabling it. I think you guys are, personally, I think you guys are headed down the right path with the master planning process, which I don't think at either location is tabling it. And I appreciate what you're saying time wise. So maybe we think this through a little bit more. You know, you factor in community engagement, and the, you know,
that may be just as long as doing the master plan.
and I'll be honest with you,
Not more.
I think that you'll get the community feedback there, and I haven't seen anything in this process yet that leads me to believe that it's going to be any different than what we're hearing, which is don't put it there. So I think being realistic about what our outcome is going to be, you know,
Right, I think-
and is there a way to articulate saying, look, maybe everybody could get behind this at this location with this process though. And I think that may be a completely
I'll just throw it out
okay
there.
response.
One of the key things that we talked about with pickleball also was a restroom, and the restroom from there is a long ways away.
That's true.
And I would say that, you know, rough motion, not saying a full motion, but if you put it at Autry Park and do a master plan with the skate park and you get them all kind of lined out to understand all the spaces at once, I think you could move forward on the skate park and you have a pickleball location that's close to restrooms, that you're improving the site in general because of the skate park already, and you're potentially adding that additional piece in there. And I've heard Ron definitely doesn't want it at a community park. I don't think, Naria, you want it at a community park. Corbett was for community park, and I think it's just, I mean.
Because of the master plan we didn't have. But
Right, for the master plan, and that's kind of where I'm torn on it.
So I think-
haven't quite placed.
I
well,
would
I think there may be a
prefer-
win-win. I
I'd
think there may
prefer-
be a win-win here, okay? Just real quick, if I can jump in. It's that they already told us that if we look at community park, we have to do community outreach, right?
Sorry, can't hear you.
They already told us that if we're going to look at community park, we have to do community outreach.
Engagement.
Community engagement. There you go. One of the things we could do to buy a little more time is we tell the board, hey, we've narrowed it down. One of the areas that we're heavily considering is community park, and we would like to pursue the community engagement while we still look at the other option of a master plan at Autry. But let's do this in parallel so that we have that one, and if we once we get the community engagement and we have that feedback, it's going to help our decision,
Do you feel that we need another community engagement on pickleball before we pick a location? Or
not on
can I say-
pickleball, not on pickleball.
Only if it's community park.
But I'm just saying, if it's community park, but, I mean, we haven't proposed officially exactly where in Autry, did we? We did say it was,
That's
mean-
part
I mean,
of- that's part of.
I'm just
the-
throwing it out there.
Either location, you're gonna have to do outreach. It doesn't matter. The only,
Right.
Yeah.
we did it basically for founders, for,
And there-
and for the
Yeah.
Yarrow.
Private.
There's
So
nothing
we
to say
didn't
that.
do it at Autry or community park.
No.
They were discussed in the meeting. They were not publicized prior to the meeting.
I know, and that's
There's
why
a
I'm asking,
distinction.
because there's a,
It's not like
yeah,
you want-
have to bring it back up.
There's nothing that says we can't do community engagement at both locations. But I'm saying is that, we could tell maybe we recommend that we're torn between these two locations, tell them exactly why, that we're looking for, a master plan of this to see how it fits in, and this one would fit in today, but we would need to do the next step of getting community engagement in both locations while we're still debating it to help inform our decision.
So move it forward.
Yeah, we're
I
gonna
want,
just,
I want to see, can I make a motion that we propose it at Autry Park and do a master plan and community service, or community involvement for Autry and community park?
we don't need a motion for that.
I'm just,
So what
So it's
we're-
hold this on
what
the
I'm
table?
hearing is we're gonna have to hold another public engagement meeting for pickleball location. We will discuss Autry Park, but really that needs a master plan before we can make any recommendation for Autry. Community Park, and I would
can you
like
just layer
to
it in?
add Founders again
I'll do a master
with
plan.
the location to the east of the playground, since the last one was discussed to the west. So we're gonna have to do that probably next month, because we need this, I think, still do it quickly. So let's move on to the next topic. All right.
Before we
I need to
move
back,
on, though,
what are we, I need
I
to
just-
back up. What are we going?
We're gonna have to hold public engagement before we can make a recommendation.
On we're going, because we gotta advertise this, so I actually do think there needs to be
Community
kind of a
park,
motion here.
Autry
Because
Park.
I'm gonna have to spend time and money to make this happen, so I need to get this clear, it needs to be on the record, and we need to make sure we're doing this
I'm
right.
not typing right now.
So, I heard a motion was thrown out there, but this can't be willy-nilly.
I
This
think-
is my time, this is taxpayer dollars, the board's asked for it, we gotta get it right. It may not be pretty, it may be painful, but we're gonna get it right. So,
Right,
let's get it right.
Well, I think maybe we just go down and say we've narrowed it to 3 locations, but we feel we gotta have more outreach, engagement, whatever you wanna call it, on those 3 locations. Founders, Autry, and especially, I would put Community Park, or Autry, and then Founders last, just as kind of, it's still in the mix, kind of a thought process. Again, just talking out loud here.
But to me, I mean, personally, I think Founders is out. It's too close to homes, it's in 300 foot.
But it's the only one that we can get done this year, guaranteed.
That,
And before the weather
If the
gets
direction from the board is they want it done this year, You're not building it at Autry this year, I can tell you that right now.
The way I see it is, if we're basically saying that we can't make a recommendation without further public engagement, I think we need to leave Founders in there. Because it's still, it may not be the first choice, but it's still in consideration for the reasons Ron just stated. So, yes, if we need a motion, then I will say, this is the motion. PROSTAC cannot make a recommendation on pickleball location without further public engagement. The committee would like to hold public engagement meeting to further discuss locations at Community Park, Autry Park, and Founders Park.
Can we add that PROSTAC needs to spend time planning the Autry Park location?
That will just be part of the discussion. I
Okay.
don't think it needs to be specifically added.
Are we expecting anything new from the community engagement?
I am
mean,
not.
I
But
I
if we're
know that
doing our
I
due
know that we give the
diligence.
opportunity to people to come here, but everybody's gonna say the same. I don't want
So
to. be
Peter-
Madam
Well,
Chair.
all right, so I made a motion.
So
Do
Peter
we
made a
have
motion.
second?
I second it.
All right, second, so discussion.
Now let's have discussion. I was just trying to get there.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, definitely have to go over that one more time.
You didn't catch it.
Keep going.
So Nuria's point is anything gonna change? I don't know that it will change, but we have to do our due diligence.
But I think the fact that we're publicizing Community Park will get some activity, hopefully. I mean, if it doesn't, then maybe that's the place to put it. I don't know. If there's not enough people who wanna voice their opinion on it. I mean, that's the whole point of the outreach. So, as well as Autry, I think if it's publicized and people are interested, and
Yeah, no, but my
All we
point
can
is,
do is
are
open
we
it up.
expecting to hear anything new from someone that comes here?
Dog sensitivity to pickleball. I have no
Yeah.
idea what we're gonna hear. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, we need the,
I think your earlier process was a little more nebulous. It was more of a discussion of sites. In this, if you say, we're gonna make a decision,
Right.
and it's gonna be one of these 3 sites, then you may get a stronger reaction. It was a little more nebulous, but that's
Mhm.
my sense of the way we
right.
And I do
publicized
want to
it.
reiterate,
Yeah.
you guys are in a tough spot, and I want to appreciate I do appreciate that, and but you guys are on the right path. I think that the community engagement piece of it is critical to making sure that not only that you're figuring out and hearing, but I think there's value in the board hearing the message as well. You know, it's always more exciting to build the product than to do all the background to get there. But this one is sticky, you know, and I think we're gonna have to kind of fully vet this out. And I appreciate that it wasn't your guys' project and it wasn't even your guys' recommendation to get it here. So I know that that's super frustrating. But you know, there's a lot of horsepower in this room, and I think the opportunity to get it really, really right is worth kind of the diligence, even though it might be a little bit painful.
I'm from my seat, I'm much more, as part of the discussion point, I'm much more comfortable with this avenue we're taking than saying voting no, me voting no to one of the locations I didn't like. You know, probably would vote no to almost all of them because I don't think any of them fit our needs. But I think this is the right, much more comfortable with this process right now.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it kind of forces our hand to do some planning for Autry Park, which I think needs to be done because it's a good location, has lots of space, and we have a lot of amenities that are in the pipeline. So I think it makes a lot of sense to look at that location more closely. And I wouldn't want to say no to Autry Park for pickleball just because we haven't spent that time looking at that location. So I agree that this process seems better to me.
Any further
There you go,
discussion?
Got it.
I'm gonna read something here in a minute, and you guys can hash it a little bit. All right, I caught some of it, didn't catch all of it. PROSTAC requests further public engagement via town meeting to make a recommendation on final site selection. We need to publicly address the following 3 sites: Community Park, Autry Park, and Founders Park. I mean, there was a bunch of other stuff in there,
So
but
the first part,
that's what I
of
caught
I
was the
said
high points.
PROSTAC cannot make a recommendation of pickleball location without further public engagement. second part.
further.
Which is what you're saying about being more
Yeah.
strong, hey,
More
we're down
specific.
to 3.
Yeah, it's gonna be one
Okay.
of these.
PROSTAC cannot make an official recommendation without further public engagement. And I added the via a town meeting to make a recommendation on final site selection.
I would say probably community outreach rather than via town. I don't know. Do we have to go
I
via
don't know what it
town?
is. I'm just by having a public
Outreach.
meeting.
Now, when we have all those negative comments for the 3 sites, how are we gonna vote decide?
Well, I mean, I think what it comes down to is, if we go this route and we have the meeting, or a outreach next month before the meeting, at the meeting, we need to finalize one of those 3 sites after what we hear in the room.
Right.
And I think by having that additional public input, we cannot back down on a final selection after, a recommendation of a selection next month.
I think in many ways, we're basically gonna be weighing the negatives, not the pros.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I think that's just the hand we've been dealt. So, do we need to read that again, or are we all okay?
Did you want to add
I'll-
the second piece in?
He has it, Kev, do you wanna read it?
I'm gonna read it again, and I'm sure there's some wording not right. PROSTAC cannot make an official recommendation without further public engagement by having a public outreach meeting. And I think I could probably get rid of this to make a recommendation on final site selection, because that's kind of what we said at the beginning now. So I can take that part out. And then we need to publicly address the following 3 sites: Community Park, Autry Park, and Founders Park.
Oh, I mean, we want to say a little stronger, we have narrowed it down to these 3, we want to publicly address them. To say,
Yeah,
these are
make-
the 3 that we're actually choosing from versus it being more nebulous, saying, hey, we still want more information on these 3. No, we've narrowed it down to these 3, we want to specifically talk about these 3 because it's gonna go in one of those 3.
Yeah, I agree. That'll probably grab more attention.
Right.
Wait, you get that quick.
I do it in my own way, but yes, I kind of got it.
Now you go.
You put it in bold.
We have narrowed the site down to the following locations for discussion with the public: Community Park, Autry Park, and Founders Park.
Sounds good.
All in
Okay.
favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
We agree.
Alright, so unanimous
So,
to hold further public engagement on these 3 sites.
so that was the motion because we didn't identify a time. I would still say that, do we need to solidify that a public engagement email will be sent out to have a, what is it, an hour before the next meeting?
I think it's gonna have to be, so it'll have to be
Whatever timeline that is.
from 6 to 7
You know,
on,
yeah.
April 18th.
So there were some other, do we look at trying to do things like targeted mailings? Do we want to look, obviously e-blasts are relatively easy to do.
To the addresses
I mean,
that
is
I mean,
there-
technically, are
Do we
any of
wanna-
the homes within distance that they need an actual, written notice?
Yeah, if it were an
So then
FDP.
then I guess, yeah.
All locations then are within
I
500
don't know how you
feet.
do that with Horizons, but,
We could reach out to their,
I mean, yeah,
their
it's fair,
management
unit
company.
numbers or whatever. I mean, I guess same thing with Saddlebrook.
Yeah.
You need to pick.
And that's just
Yeah.
one of the email respondents from the first go around said, hey, is there any way to do like a Survey Monkey and allow more digital input for people who just don't have the bandwidth or the capacity to attend another meeting on top of everything? And I kind of just filed that one away. The guy gave us his input anyway. But so I think all ideas are good ideas, capturing the most valuable information to help either support the case one way or the other. And maybe we look at things
Yeah,
like that.
we could maybe do a Survey Monkey. I did it for the skate park.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know if this is right or not, but maybe Horizons wouldn't be the management that you
Yeah.
need to reach, because the people move in and out, and
Yep.
they might see it as a plus or a minus, but they are the ones that rent the apartments.
We'll figure it out.
Mhm.
So let's move on to indoor space, because we're not gonna have enough time that this deserves to be discussed tonight anyway. Pickleball was like an hour and a half. So based on feedback from the board at the dinner, they want, a recommendation from PROSTAC for basically a community center vision. I don't feel that that this is really anything that's going to require more information than we already have to put together. It's just a matter of putting it together. So I just want to quickly review. March of last year, we made a recommendation that a community center include the following amenities: required building support spaces, facility administration spaces, senior adult lounge, child watch, wet classroom / party room, single middle court gymnasium, weight / fitness room, 32 to 40 person aerobic dance room, a jog walk track, large climbing wall, 25-yard competitive and leisure pool, and then the aquatic support spaces, a cafe, and then the two that were kind of to be determined items were a 160 person community room with warming kitchen, and in lieu of the single court MAC gym, a full court wood basketball gymnasium.
And were those in order of priority?
They weren't really in order
No.
of priority, I don't believe. So if you look at that list, essentially what you have is a recreation center with the addition of the senior adult lounge, a possible large community room, and then just support spaces. For the most part, you had recreation amenities. The way that I think, definitely I am leaning more now, and I feel probably some of the committee members are, and certainly some of the board members are, is that of any facility that is going to move forward, whether it be, as part of the partnership with Sports Stable and Impact Sports, or it's the civic space in town center that's up to 40,000 square feet, or it's a building somewhere else in town, or it's a combination of everything, that it lean a little bit less away from just rec amenities and a little bit more towards overall community amenities, that there needs to be more community gathering space, and you can interpret that in many different ways, but essentially space that's not just an athletic club. And I think that's what we really need to focus on. What are the core rec amenities, but also, as far as that vision piece, what activities do we really see going on in this facility for the community, and based on those activities, what are the spaces that are needed to support them? So, my idea there is, do we want a space that can hold art classes, not just for kids but for adults? Do we want a space that provides after school care? Do we want a space that offers all kinds of social activities, whether it's for seniors, adults, teens, or children that are maybe not recreation, that are, I have no idea. Well, your imagination can start playing here. I mean, whether there are courses on, different like STEM activities, whether they're dances or dance lessons or any of this stuff.
So-
What do we think we would like to see happen in a building, and then what spaces do we need to make those activities happen?
I guess my thought on this was, that's why I asked you my question. And we have the list of stuff that the community said that they're really looking for. If we have the data, it'd be really interesting to see if we have the capability to prioritize this, so we can say, here's the list of stuff that the community says in the order. Now, if you take a look at this, you can have one building that might be able to do this much, or, hey, this is a rec center and this is not a rec center, where you could consider doing two different facilities. If we paired with impact sports, we get this, then you have, this would need to be covered by some other thing. But it's there, and you can take a look at, what can I get, and where does that rank to what people want, right? And not how we're going to use it, but just in terms of a recreation amenity type thing, okay, like they said. And to me, it's a little easier to visualize, okay, well, if I just went with impact sports and I have this thing prioritized, I might be giving up my top 4. If that's the priority, if these other things were the priority, well, by just doing impact sports, I'm giving up my top 4. Am I really willing to give up my top 4 to get the next 8 on the list? I don't know. Where does that trade? Or if, maybe it's the fact we get 2 through 6 by pairing up with impact sports, and we're just giving our top 1. I might be more willing to that, right? I just, I would like to just kind of see how everything ranks with each other.
I do think we need to take into consideration the survey results. At the same time, I think that the survey results heavily focused on recreation amenities. And at the same time, I think, the survey is now, 3 years old? And so I feel like whereas it might not be ranked because we don't have statistical data behind it, I think that there's a lot more available to us through just community engagement that's been done through this community, through board meetings that have discussed a variety of things, including this impact sports, the previous proposal that was brought forth a couple years ago by impact sports that dealt with recreation, that have said it's not just recreation amenities that are needed. Is it library services? Is it any number of things that are not quantified on the survey? And I think we need to pit all this stuff against each other to get a recommendation. So ultimately, the recommendation of this committee might not be heavily supported by the survey, but it's supported by years of public engagement.
Right, and you don't have to have, and it may not even be, like you're saying, that it has to be 1, 2, 3, but we could say this area is what we've heard the most from everybody that we really need, this next area, and then that way you can still see that if you team up here, you do this other thing, are you giving up some of the stuff that was the most requested, or are you not giving up, just as a understanding?
So I guess I'm going to try and just, from my standpoint, are we recommending a single building, multiple buildings?
At this point, I
Or
think we're recommending
a retrofit to a building across the street?
I think at this point
Are we-
we're recommending more a set of amenities that
I don't care how we get them as long as we get this list.
Exactly. So
Right.
the decision could be, we can get all 10 amenities, but not in one building.
Right. So
Or it could be all in one building, and that building is
so
very specific to this location. We don't know yet that decision.
Right.
It's more, what do we feel like this community needs, the
And-
amenities that it needs?
and that's where I would take that list. I mean, I know you went through that list, but I can't visualize that entire list. It took too long. But I mean, I don't know if there's a way to project it, or we can all look at it and go through that list, because to me, I agree with you. I think our task is to say, this is what the community really wants from all the information we've had from the surveys and everything else. We've narrowed it down to this list. And then from there, because I have a vision of a community center that's still on Town 15 that says, I walk in the front door, it's this wonderful atrium space, and I got lounge chairs, and there's meeting rooms on that side and rec rooms on the other side. We're not gonna get that. But on the other hand, if I get a building with all the kind of community center space needs that has meeting space and library and, you know, whatever, breakout space, and a recreation facility across the street or down the street or in proximity or however it's, I just want to know that we're getting those amenities in town.
Yeah, I
Linda,
guess
go ahead,
The thing
Colby.
that, what I was trying to articulate earlier is, you know, if it's just a list of things, and we may not, you know, get everything on that list.
How do we, yeah.
How do we know which ones we're really willing to give up? How do we know which ones the communities want less than the other stuff that, okay, if I have to strike one thing, what would I strike?
Well, that's the other, that's the other thing I wanna actually
But I
try
wanna create a
to
list.
avoid in this exercise, is this idea that if the top, you know, if there's 10 things on the list, if we get 7 of them, then we're happy. I think that, that's why I'm really hesitant to prioritize. I think it's, we wanna shape an idea of a, I don't want to say like we need to have all of them, but in a way I do want to say that, because I think that we can shave amenities right now that we could let go. Like cafe, I think we can let that go personally.
Mhm.
The child watch, if it's not a full recreation, like kind of more fitness center, I think unfortunately we could probably shave the child watch. I do personally think it's needed, but if we're talking about having limited space, limited funds, climbing wall, another one, probably could be shaved. So I think we can do a lot to just narrow it down to be like, look, these are core, like we're giving you a list that we really strongly feel like this is it. We're not saying, you know, 60% or greater is that you got the majority of the list, we're good. No, we're saying these are the amenities this town needs. Maybe they don't go all into one building, but ideally from a, let's use it again, master plan view, these are the amenities that should go in across the town in some fashion.
Right, and I guess I think the only difference I'm seeing what you're saying is that you might have and what I meant by priority, it doesn't have to be 1, 2, 3, it could be, these are the things we have to have. These are the next important things that, you know, childcare or cafe, you know, tiered levels, right? And you say, we think we can, you know, this is what we've heard. We think in order of importance, it may just be a level 3 importance compared to these other things that if, you know, it's not quite as important. Get this, but if there's extra space as well, we start looking at the tier 2 to include, right?
I think yeah, you can, you know, just in the same way we kind of, when we talked about the pickleball, we sort of intentionally put Founders as the last one because we kind of know it's the last one on the list. I think we can put them in an order without actually numbering them. That is kind of like first tier, second tier, third tier. We might not actually say this is first tier, second tier, third tier. We can just kind of order them in that fashion, that if we then got pushed by the board as to what are the highest priority, it's like, well, they're basically in order. We don't want to number it 1, 2, 3, but we essentially sequenced it in a way that we feel what's most important, next most important.
Some of them.
But one way or another, you are prioritizing. that.
You're
And-
doing
and
it
re-
without labels.
But and in real life, even though we want to give the picture of everything that we want, in real life, we probably won't get everything that we want. So.
No
But
matter
that's
what.
why I'm also saying we need to be realistic about it. We don't want to get like.
Sorry.
Keep going. Just keep going.
Yeah. So.
All
right.
I'm hopping in. No matter what we create in a list, whether it's prioritized or not, it's going to come down to funding as well and the amount of square footage. And if I add in a art classroom for 400 square feet and there's, you know, it's finishes on the wall and it's a blank room, right? Where if I add in a pool and mechanical room, it's millions of dollars more. So therefore, it's going to sort itself out with what can be achieved
Right.
when you put it together as a design. So we put the amenities together, we create a list, and we say, these are the things that we really want, can you get it all in there? And then they try and get it in there. And for the budget that we have.
I guess the other way I would put it is, what's the minimum that's gonna satisfy the community's needs?
Are we factoring in impact sports? Is that a consideration?
I think
So-
we have to create the amenity list,
Yeah.
and then whether it fits into impact sports and we can work with them as a way to get that amenity, great.
Mhm.
But otherwise, I mean, these are the amenities, and this is the indoor space that we need as a community to make us whole,
Mhm.
right? And whether you put that in impact sports to get us the ice hockey and the basketball court and those type of things, but then you put right across the street, you put another building that has meeting rooms and art rooms and classrooms and things like that, you still got the amenities somehow. And it's not always up to us to figure out which one is the best, but we need the list first, and then the vision of, can you get it in one building, or do we need to split it up?
Mhm.
And for me, once I get the list, do I say, does Impact Sports provide that list if they do the renovation? Or is it still not going to provide all the pieces we're looking for? So, I mean, I feel personally that Impact Sports provides a lot of opportunities, but if they could just squeak in that last level to get all the pieces in the program, because they're losing some of the pieces. And that's where in the
Well,
discussion
and
of it's across the street.
The other
came up.
thing that you know, in having talked to the
But-
people involved with Impact Sports and Sports Stable on their side, they look at a list and they're like, oh, well, you said community room. We put a community room in. Well, it's all right. You put a box in a corner of a building. We by saying vision, we're more defining what that box needs to accommodate, what it needs to do. Just because you have a community room does not mean that it can host activities A, B, C, D, and E, and F. It could hold a meeting, and that's like it. If all you do is put a room with some chairs, we need to be by using the word vision. I think what we're saying is a lot more specific than just a list of amenities. It's a list of amenities and the services and activities that it can support.
That's kind of that, when I basically said you walk in a large atrium and then there's a lounge space off to the side and then there's rec center on the other side. You know, it's like, how do you feel when you're in the space? What are you trying to use it for? Not just a community room.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll be happy to, I don't remember who actually was on the committee when we did this visioning exercise, but I'll probably plan to send this document out. The board had asked, this was when we were still looking at some indoor space on the promenade, you know, and it was great because we even were able to kind of drill down with what does our civic space, what should our civic space look like? And then we kind of combined some survey stuff. So I don't know who on this current sitting group has seen it, but I'll send it out. And then that way you guys can kind of see what one of the previous processes look like. But then, we kind of had these, we tried to be really diligent. We brought in Frank with BRS for, kind of a nominal fee. It wasn't a master plan level, but he took a lot of the feedback from the group and kind of started saying, well, yeah, we know we need an elevator, so we're going to put elevator on the list, but it's not going to take away from what the vision of this floor looks like. It was much more of a visual representation. But it was nice because we also had somebody who was saying, well, don't forget you need things like bathrooms, or don't forget that you need like some office space. So I'll send this to the group because I don't know who's actually seen it or was a part of that previous process.
So yeah, I don't know the best way that we're gonna represent this vision, but I would say between now and the next meeting, each of us should think about, what activities would we really like to see in this town? Is it writing classes? Is it a maker space? Is it, or is it a pool? I mean, that could be part of what you like. I want an indoor swimming pool. That could be what you come up with, and that's fine, because this probably is gonna be a mix of recreation and non-recreation amenities. So think of activities that you would really like to see offered in this community by the town, not necessarily a private entity, but by the town. And from that, determine, well, this is what I think the space needs to be. Like, it needs to be, you know, a classroom with a sink, so it could be art classes, and it needs to be, you know, like Corey's example, maybe it needs to be some large atrium that can support, you know, X, Y, and Z. That's what we kind of need to come into next meeting with, ideas like that, and we need to put them all together, see where we overlap, and through discussion decide what, you know, what needs to be on the list. And I would say in all of this, think that the budget is as small, like, what, no greater than, or no greater than, say, $20 million, like, for to do all these things. We're not
You guys can
thinking of
envision
an unlimited budget, unlimited space. Like, we need to be realistic in what can happen in, whether it's one building or two buildings. We pretty much know it's not gonna be $40 million and 60,000+ square feet. We're probably working with a combination of the civic space, which is up to 40,000 square feet, and maybe,
Which is what that is.
which is what this is, which Patrick will send out, and
not-
what we've seen for Impact Sports, and we basically know that the budget. Did we ever have a budget on this?
It was like
12 or 12,
Yeah.
12 to 14.
So
Yeah, but
let's say like 15 to 20 is probably what.
Right, so if you weren't here, this is the 40,000 square foot piece of the puzzle. This is not the impact. This was just what could we do with just that 40? I think we broke it out
And
to
it-
3 or 4 levels.
It was like library, meeting, art space,
Right.
meeting space, like, yeah, it was.
And this is definitely more community rooms versus activity
Yeah,
type
this
Yeah,
spaces.
the focus that the board asked you to go after, and I'll just kind of come in, is community gathering space. That, those were the operative words, and they didn't come out of me, but
Recreation
but-
space, spaces to recreate, not to,
they're not talking recreation.
Not gym, just
They're
any
not
kind of
talking gym,
recreation.
they're talking places where the citizens in the community can come together and do things.
Right.
Like a
you know,
community center that
so-
may have some recreational activity, but
Yeah.
we're looking at the community.
And,
Any kind of recreation.
yeah, you know, look at some of the activities that might happen at the Louisville Public Library. Do you want those kinds of activities? And I would recommend, do go back and look at the comments that we received on the 2014 survey. There were some ideas in there of the kinds of things. So even though there were amenities, when you dug down into the comments, you may find some guidance there also.
Is that the 2014 survey, remind me, is that linked on the,
And then based on what we come up with in the next meeting, we'll have to have some discussion as to whether or not we want to ask for some of the, so there's $75,000 in the budget this year that was meant for potentially studying a, you know, indoor space like ballot initiative. Clearly, the ballot initiative is not going to happen this year, but the 75,000 still exists. So do we request of the board that we start spending some of that money on this community center like vision? And then we might be able to come up with something more like this to represent our vision.
and I'll have to send you mine, Peter, because I know I'm gonna be out next week. I'll be on travel, or not next week, but next month I'll be on travel. But I'll put it together and send it to you so you have it.
Okay. Yeah, if anyone else thinks they'll be out, do the same thing, if you could, because I don't wanna say we wanna rush this process, but, you know, we know that the board is actively still discussing the impact sports piece of this potential equation. And so we don't want to drag out this too long. We want to put something in front of them so that they can consider it as part of their, process that they're considering for impact sports is, okay, are we satisfying the needs of the community with the impact sports deal? Hopefully this will help inform them a little bit as to what some of those needs might be.
Can you send out that list that you read off? Or do
Yeah.
you already have it?
I put a spot to insert it on the
It's
notes too.
it's
Okay.
just for anyone that wants to reference. It's in the meeting notes from March 2017.
And actually, I've gone through, I was actually just going to mention that. You guys previously, we had some really, really good recommendations. And I think one that it always kind of stuck out is Peter actually, if you guys remember, you guys worked quite a bit on this, what we were calling Community Recreation Center at the time. But in here, you guys specified that you were looking at recreational amenities because that's basically what you were asked to do. So I've got a set of last year's meeting notes with these kind of highlighted and separated out. So I don't know if that's beneficial to send along. But, there were some really, really solid recommendations that led us up to, even considering things like Lakeshore, which feels like years and years ago. So I've got a whole separate set of these that I could redistribute back out if you guys want them. And then, as what Peter was just mentioning, if you go to our, there was kind of that initial list. But the context always was as we were looking at the more recreational, because I think that was kind of the charge at the time, or the task at the time. So I could send these back
Well,
out.
yeah, because if you remember, this is around the time frame that we were starting to look at the whatever Lifetime was before.
Lakeshore.
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 Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was more focused on recreation.
And if I recall, we were also thinking that there was going to be some civic space, maybe for these other activities in the town.
In the
I
town
think
center?
in the town
Well,
center.
that's the previous graphic that Patrick had up, was the civic space for the up to 40,000 square feet of civic space in the town center. That still has not been defined at this point, so I know that at least Corey and I have both mentioned it, that it's possible that that would house a fair number of the amenities that we're talking about. That could be in addition to or in lieu of impact sports, we don't know. So that's another big question is, is this all going to go on one facility or not? And at this point, I think we just need to think of what the community really needs, regardless of location and regardless of whether it's in one location or multiple. That can be a discussion for later. Right now, we just need to narrow down what we really think are the most important amenities. Okay. So moving forward to 5-year trails plan. Usually when we begin work on this, the first thing we really do is look at last year's trails plan and decide, are there any trails we want to add or remove from last year's list. So everyone has the list. If you want to just take a look at it real quick. Nothing has been built last year.
If we want,
Hey, Corbett, you wanna hit the lights?
I can go grab some markers if we want to start drawing this deal. Remember guys might have been before the fine list.
Well, and
And then we switched to, you remember the board had some conversations about us trying to get away from numbering because the numbering was different, trying to come up with a
Right.
unified lettering system.
But I was gonna say, M's been constructed
Well, I guess,
now.
yeah, I guess it's not true. We did complete one.
M's done.
So what is that on the numbered list here?
I don't know. Right, M's done. It's built out to about here right now.
M's being built, yeah.
And isn't N the additional section because M is by,
I actually don't
Yeah,
see
know
it
which one that is.
on here.
You know what, this might actually be,
You got an older one.
yeah, you know
Cause
what?
this is showing up and tract H is shown now too.
Actually, that
Yeah,
Cause that's
right.
D's
M
old
does
one.
not actually show up on this list
Yeah.
from last
Alright,
year.
All right,
so
put that
the-
down,
yeah.
table that.
You know what that- So the list that you guys have is the combined committee
Where's my
recommendations.
where's my binder?
And if you guys would like to see just your specific, I could pull that up. to
Well,
show.
and that, I guess that's one other thing to discuss is on the work plan, and I have to pull up the work plan, the exact wording, but basically, the way that we put the work plan for this year was that we would take input from OSAC on the 5-year trails plan. I don't know that that necessarily means doing a combined ranking this year, because the problem with doing the combined ranking is that I think it really skews towards those open space trails, because you have 9 members who are, all they care about is open space, whereas you have here 9 members that are concerned about the entire trail network, the majority of which is actually not natural open space. So from the standpoint of the entire town and its trail network, I feel like at this point PROSTAC has a better understanding of it than maybe OSAC really does, and so I think we take input from OSAC, but I don't know if we want to have an equal representation of input on the 5-year trails plan that this committee puts forward. OSAC would potentially put forward their own recommendation of the 5-year trails plan. That's a discussion that we'll have to have, whether we want to do the same exercise we've done for the last couple of years that gives the 2 committees equal weight in the conversation or not.
I know that, the direction we got 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, how long it was that they didn't want to see 2 different recommendations. They wanted to see a congruent recommendation between the 2 committees.
And which is why we changed the way we were doing it.
Which is why we
and
changed
I just
it.
don't know that at this point, which is why it needs discussion, because this is just my opinion. I don't know that that's actually doing justice to the 5-year trails plan.
Well,
because a perfect example is that this Shan Shan trailhead keeps ending up the last couple of years in like the highest of priorities. Like it's in like the top at least 5, at least if
Mhm.
not like the top 3. And yet this committee has had serious debate as to whether a trailhead at Shan Shan is a good idea at all, let alone highest priority. So that concerns me, that because of the joint equal weight of a joint list, that something like that gets skewed.
Totally agree.
Yeah, we're obviously going to have different recommendations because both committees have different, priorities. So that's kind of what the combined scoring does, right? It helps to come up with that consensus balance, right?
Well, I think
But I agree that it's.
I think it was the theory was that it would give a balanced consensus, but my concern is that because this committee is considering, we have an interest in open space trails, but we also have an interest in non-open space trails, whereas the other committee has an interest really only in open space trails. It is not balanced.
Well, it's balanced between the 2 committees, but it's
Mhm.
it's equal partnership, not a
Well,
not a park and rec versus open space.
But I
2 or 3
think-
years ago when we did this the first time, you know, all their stuff went to the top.
But
And that was because, part of it was because had trails on there that, you know, that were done, right? Or weren't gonna get done, and they didn't consider those, so it artificially elevated there, so they got all their trails to the top. And then last year, I remember something similar happened, but, I agree with Peter.
Right, we used slightly, even though we were using the same method, we used slightly different, reasoning for
Mhm.
So-
our rankings. And so that, again, created some bias.
So-
Can you just describe this one real quick? We got the combined ranking, the combined scoring, and then all the stuff on the right, the final PROSTAC ranking. There's a final OSAC ranking, final PROSTAC, final OSAC. So we don't really care about the white columns. We just care about the green columns, right?
Well, the white, all it does is if you really want to know how each committee ranked it, so you can
Oh,
see.
so that's the 1 through
So,
whatever.
right, so you can see that, the
Scoring,
number one,
total.
Town Center Trail Connections, that was number one for OSAC and ended up number one, but it was actually number 2 for PROSTAC. Not, you're splitting hairs there, not a huge difference.
Listen.
But you look at something like we had number 9. Number 4, we had it as number 9 on our list, but because OSAC had it as number 2, it jumped up all the way to number 4. So that's the Shan Shan Trailhead, which I already mentioned.
Right.
That's a really good example. The flip of it is you look at number 5, we had it as number 5, OSAC had it as number 10. So that's one that flipped in the other direction. We heavily favored it, ended up way higher than OSAC wanted it on the list. So do you call that balanced?
Yeah, the only.
So this is like kind of the difference of the equal and fair are not the same things, So like, what are we creating a list that is? If we're creating a list that is fair, who is it really fair to?
Right,
should
I mean,
add
Is
two
it fair-
more-
is
two
it
more
fair
voters
to
in there.
OSAC? Is it fair to PROSTAC, or is it fair to both of us?
Right. So right now it's definitely OSAC heavy because of the way, like, they have a subset of everything we're voting on, right? So I think the only way to, I'm just thinking out loud here, to get that more fair representation is to have, to not, so OSAC votes on theirs and PROSTAC, we don't vote on the OSAC trails, in other words, right? So they rank their OSAC, we rank our PROSTAC.
But the fact is, I think the board was looking for, what are the high priority trails? I mean, to be blunt, how many of these are we gonna build next year? And the fact is, we're talking about, there's 9 members on their on their committee, there's 7 on ours. Together, there's 16 members saying, hey, these are important things. We're all looking at, hey, how can we improve the community and what trails should we build now next? Some of these are gonna cost more than others, so even if it jumps up or down, it's a matter of a pecking order that at least gives the board a somewhat of a sense.
Mhm.
And having these other numbers on there, you can at least see where OSAC favored one or we favored one. But there is a combined ranking, and we're giving them a recommendation that, honestly, I don't think we're gonna work too far on. I mean, 22 got completed by the developer. Yay, we got a trail. But to me, that's a trail to nowhere. And I think OSAC's on the same opinion that they're looking for connectivity to open space and interconnectivity of trails between what's built and how to get to the open space and how to utilize the open space. So for me, instead of focusing on how the numbers are skewed, I just want to know that we have somewhat of an understanding that these are the top 5, top 10, and we're not skewed and dropped way too far down on one of ours or one of theirs. Because I think that the board made it pretty clear that they left it on both of our work plans so that they could get more input from more willing committee members that wanted to talk about trails to
Right.
provide recommendation.
Well, so maybe we do the same method as previous years, and we'll figure that out next month. I think right now it's do we need to add or remove any trails from the list?
The only one I would say is we should add, and this is a question back to Patrick, that the concrete trail is already in around the skate park, that it should be addressed. And if that's addressed in the skate park, great. If it's addressed on here, that's totally something different.
I agree.
Because it's just adding another trail on the list that you're gonna cover
And
somewhere,
then,
right?
yeah,
I mean, the trail's
agree.
there, but
The
it's an
trail's there.
improvement to the trail.
Yep.
I mean, I would say that's probably, is that gonna be looked at as just part of the skate park project?
It absolutely be part of the skate
Yeah,
park
so I don't
project.
know that it needs to be.
Because
on
that
the trail
connectivity and
system.
access to it has to be addressed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I will,
See, to me,
what was shown as 18, and I totally apologize. I actually, our numbering's off, so I don't know exactly how me and my staff.
no, 18's right. 22's the one that's complete.
Screwed it up. But anyway,
22's complete.
we received some kind of negative pushback on that,
On which
on
one?
the, the social trail stuff through Coyote Ridge. So is that something, to take into consideration this year? We did receive some negative pushback on what was trail number 7. We obviously received a price point of way north of $1 million to build this trail here. So I would just to kind of remind you guys a little bit that we had that public engagement and those items were out there. But I think as we're starting to find, the tough part about doing community engagement is you normally don't hear about how great things are. You typically get to hear about how bad everything is first.
So 18 Coyote Ridge Trail maintenance and improvements, is that about the Coyote Ridge Trail where we did the community day to improve the trail?
Well,
Or is
that
about the new connectivity on the
yeah, that's
Pirate Park
something that I wanted to
and the new
do we
cutting
define
in that trail,
Mhm.
because it was kind of tied to that embankment slide, and honestly, after doing the maintenance and everything out there, give a few people some hose and they can go out and cut that trail in if somebody had staked
Well, I was
it.
gonna say, can that be prioritized now as a older youth corps project for this summer?
Which one that
The Coyote Ridge
the social trail one that
Trail. Well, so when we were talking about the embankment slide, we were also talking about the trail.
Yeah.
Well, the trail was talked about before the embankment slide, so the embankment slide might be dead, but can we still get that trail? I don't really hear any opposition to the trail.
I
I mean, we
thought
had
we did.
one.
There
We
was-
had one person who opposed it,
And
but when they
they were just
realized that it
concerned about where
sat
it was-
back a little bit further from the edge of the hill, and that we weren't like looking like right in his backyard, he seemed to be a little bit
Yeah,
more
well-
understanding.
We have a routing of that trail, right?
yeah,
a
we have a
kind of
general. Yeah.
general roughed
and
out.
we I think it even talked about trying to loop it behind that hill to alleviate those.
The concerns
That
about
concern.
walking up and viewing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, I mean that could absolutely be a project. That was what I thought was low hanging fruit. But I'd have to go back and look. I thought there was some opposition there, but maybe it was
there
just
there was
I-
one individual that came with opposition.
that was the
because
only
of-
opposition.
Because of
One
people
individual-
hiking up, looking down
yeah.
in.
But then after
right or
the-
wrong. One individual carries a lot of weight, as we're starting
after
to
the
see.
meeting, and when he realized that trail would actually be set back a little bit, he was okay.
I think you could alleviate or bring up more concern but this is a task, and I know you have limited staff, but if you stake a few just
Yeah.
where the trail would go.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
honestly, if you just lift those stakes, and if we went to having a community engagement with that group over there to say, hey, have you seen those stakes out there? Do you think that would impact it?
No, I like, and I think.
And then
I'd
at
have
some
to look,
point we
but
could
had
just
talked
cut it
about
in.
looping it on the back side and like dropping it down. So,
Proactive.
we could have that trail cut with youth corps and
A community day or
Okay.
activity
Yeah,
day,
very
just cut it
easy.
in, but
Very
the
easy.
fact is, that's something that we could potentially do just by being proactive and staking it and then having a discussion to see if there's any opposition to what's staked.
yeah, and then we are planning to do a maintenance day up there as a volunteer project. So that could be 18 could what is shown here is 18 could almost come off the list if,
Right.
if we're wanting
And-
to push forward with it.
And I would just point out 18, the other thing, we took out that bench that was in there
Yeah.
in the lower gully. I watched so many people try and jump over that now, and I've ridden my bike through the mud once, and I was like, oops. But yeah, that's still a heavily traveled, very mucky, foot-ridden area that I've noticed. And I don't know if there's a way to just put back in some railroad ties or, you know, something that kind of carries a little bit of a semblance of a bridge, because it's just bad over there. Anyway, that's a maintenance,
Yeah.
that's a trail
We
maintenance
could figure
thing.
that out.
It's a trail maintenance thing, and again, that could be on the list of trail maintenance. But to focus on the big picture of all these, though, I mean, I think that's one aspect, and it's up there on our priority for both OSAC and PROSTAC. I guess OSAC was further down, you know, down in the 10, 12 range. But I mean, for me, the intent of what we're trying to do is there, and yes, they're skewed in a couple different ways. You know, they get one, we get one, but in the long run, it provides 9 or 16 individuals to you.
Well, that's the other problem. If you have an unequal number on the committee, then one committee automatically gets favored. I mean, like, even when we both had 9, we always had one committee member who didn't vote.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
So we always had a little bit less of a voice in the combined ranking.
But I look at our PROSTAC rankings, the top 10, our top 10 are pretty much within the top 10.
I mean, one way to alleviate that, Peter, is
Right.
they rank theirs internally, we rank ours internally, and then you rank the
Just one
accumulation
to one.
of each one. That way it's, what did they do, what did we do, instead of having each individual.
1 to 1, 2 to
Right.
2.
Right, yeah. No, I
Yeah,
get it.
that's
That-
community or committee versus.
One comment I had on what you're saying about the skate park, you said that little trail is gonna be addressed. I thought the trail that we were talking about went all the way up to the
Well, no.
concrete, so it's not the whole
Can
thing,
you
right?
zoom in on
No,
that?
that's,
No.
Is that a separate one?
that's on this list, number 17,
Okay,
is
Oh,
to
yeah, just-
convert the entire
No, just
Rock
on
Creek
that.
Just
Regional
just
Trail
leave that PDF
from-
up there.
Right.
It's okay.
from like under the, from where the bridge comes out.
You can just pan
and
over,
it,
yeah.
and
It's
it
Trail
turns
19.
from concrete to dirt, all
from
the
dirt
way.
to concrete,
or-
So,
because
No.
it is dirt.
so the
No,
trail
when
I'm
you're
saying.
when you're coming from, if you're going west to
Here,
east,
Corbett.
it's concrete as it goes through Community Park,
Yes.
like north of Safeway.
Yep.
And then it converts from concrete
Yep.
to dirt.
This is gravel.
Here, hold on, let me.
Yeah, right now it's
Oh,
gravel.
I was presenting.
We're talking about making
I
it
was in my
concrete.
element here.
Yeah.
Get
It's
back
like
in the
converted.
element really
Converted.
quick.
Here, but
Concrete.
it's this
Yeah, you said
segment right
converted to
here,
dirt.
Corbett.
Yeah, yeah.
This segment right here that would be concrete to get to the skate park from concrete,
Okay,
or
yeah.
from the parking area.
But there was always on the
And
trail,
this is the
connection to the
Karcher
36.
line,
Yeah.
because that's still a potential modification to upgrade to get from a biking perspective to the.
Right, I was making
US
sure you weren't
36
saying
right
that.
away. But this path right here is the crusher fine that has to be upgraded
Yes.
to get access to the skate
Just
park.
want to make sure you're saying those are two different things.
I'm saying it too.
And
Yeah.
there are 2 different
And
trails.
that's why I said, do we need to add a line
Gotcha.
for it, but if it's covered in the skate park,
A
or at
little
least
bit.
addressed so that
Yeah.
people have access to it. That's why I said it too.
All right, so if we have nothing else, it's almost 9:30. So we'll,
You can punt on. the
well, what do we think? Do we think we're ready to do our rankings before April, or do we want to discuss more before we do the rankings? I mean, does everyone feel like they're ready to just rank this list again? All right.
No.
No? We'll talk about it again next month. I mean, in most years, we haven't gotten to this until like June, I think, at least the finalized list. So we have time. All right, so real quick, just a more of a think piece than really a discussion topic.
Patrick, before we get off the trails, is there more descriptive trails within town center at this
Still
point?
not.
Still nothing, but that trail 6 right there is on the west side,
Yeah.
and the tract H is shown. I mean, I would almost say, is there a way to propose a connectivity to tract H at any location?
So we were just talking about that. We can towards McCaslin, but we don't own the property to connect it on the other side.
So it's still, no matter what, it
You're
will
waiting
always
for
be an out
future.
and back.
Until that other development comes in.
Well, and until we know
But
where the
there's
Coal Creek Drive is gonna go through, right?
Yeah, and there's no way to connect into town center because
We
town
don't.
center is controlled by the developer.
So, and we put it in because we knew, let's do all the public engagement, let's just get it done and get it done once. So I will say we are working
I
on.
just want to see utilization of a trail that we finally built.
What's that?
I just want to see connectivity and utilization. I mean, a lot of what I focus on, and I know OSAC stated, is the interconnectivity
Yeah.
of trails. And we
I would look
put
at
in
this
a trail
one.
that
it-
doesn't have
I
that
would look at this
connectivity.
as an opportunity we struck while the iron was hot. And other than that, there was a chance that it may not have gone in at all. So I get, and if you remember, our recommendation was trails to nowhere are a bad idea. But I think there was some people that felt like there was value to get it in
Okay.
and get it established. We can go this way. We could take it from,
Yeah, but it doesn't already connect somewhere.
nope.
I don't.
There's a maintenance access
haven't
road gone there.
Well, yeah, it was part of a project that was getting done,
There's like a small parking area.
so.
Corbett, I'm sorry, man. You want to kill those lights one more time?
That's what you get, Corbett.
Yep. It keeps me awake. Keeps me awake, man.
All right, so tract H ended right here. This is actually tract A. So up until the very end of the tract H project, we didn't own A. A was owned by the Discovery Office Park. We now officially own A, but there are some really significant grades to get the trail, which is probably sitting, so here's a culvert. So the trail's probably sitting right about here. You have they're definitely not ADA compliant. I'm not saying that we have to make them ADA compliant. There is nothing right now other than kind of where we were driving the trucks to get you from here to this road to here. And there's nothing that would get you from here up to this. Remember, this isn't our road, this is private property.
Yeah.
So now over here, this is going to be a future development. This is called the Anderson property.
Yep.
So Tract H Trail ends right here because we have no clue what this is. So we don't own an easement over this road. This is CDOT, so we don't own that, and we don't own this. So
Well, and you
we
can't even tie to the 36 bikeway. there.
no, because there's CDOT properties in the middle. So
And where is Park 5?
Park 5's right here. Ish.
So hopefully there's a connectivity in
Well,
Park 5. to
it's
it?
tough because this is CDOT, and so we could potentially like go down that path. But I
Or-
think where we're at right now is,
I can make sure that I can guarantee there'll be a cattle trail.
Hey, and
a
that's
common
fine
path-
because that's not-
a common path that we don't put in if we can just connect to the other side.
there's a couple of things that as a town we need to be careful about and the biggest thing is we need to make sure that we're not knowingly encouraging people to trespass on private property, and that especially with the ditch company and private.
Right.
So and that's just a little bit of where we're at. We took it as an opportunity. We finally got everybody comfortable with that trail alignment, and we already had broached that conversation.
Right.
So we said we're going all in with it, and we'll make the connectivity when. So
It'd be great to, for me, I mean, if we could, I would add that as a trail on this list to say, even the west side, if there's a track out there already, it'd be great to add that to the list as a location of a potential trail. Just, I mean, even if it's just a crusher, fine, like 4 foot wide or 5 foot wide, whatever,
yeah.
width of a truck.
So this is actually when they did the road cut for our project. So
'Cause, I
this
mean-
is where it'll come up, and then just the only other, just more kind of an FYI for just everybody who lives in town. So we are doing a street overlay project over McCaslin, and this will be all the equipment staging. So I think once we get through that, then I think we get a little bit closer to doing the trail alignment.
And then one other one that I've noticed is that this Trail 22, sorry, I'm on, yeah, no, you guys were wanting to leave, but I just want to hit all these. On Trail 22, at the other end, Trail 1, they have a concrete trail to the backside, and then they have a driving trail down there. Have you seen that? There's like a driveway that they have just, a couple tracks cut in. You seen that? It's up toward the gate, like right where number 1 is pointing.
Well, they're still building those homes there.
Well, but that's the thing, is they're actually done building the ones on that side.
No, that's the last phase, I think. The lowest, the part closest to.
So there's a trail now that
that's
comes
a concrete
down
trail
through
to
here.
there, but I'm saying further up to the.
This way?
Yep, keep going down. Sorry.
Keep
Up the
going.
hill. It's right there. That.
Yeah, this is the
that.
urban drainage access road for their channel.
And there's a road, and then it stops at the backside of that house.
Yep.
Has a concrete path right there.
Yep.
Starts right there.
Yeah, so in their FDP, they wanted to build the trail.
Right.
And then we said, well, you could build it to the edge of our property, but we could prioritize. That could be a trail connection. If you
I mean,
remember,
because the trail's there. It's just there's like a fence that you can't really get into it.
Yeah,
So
'cause
if you were on Colton or McCaslin, you could get into that trail.
right? And
Like
I'm
go-
just looking at trails that are already
Go
cut.
through the homes and come out on Colton. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, it's just one of those that I'm just seeing that there's trails already cut, and it's a question of,
well,
is there connectivity
I think
there,
there's
or
a
did they
difference
just
between
stop?
trails and access roads because we actually don't own that over there. So that's urban drainage.
Well, and that's where I was
So
asking,
that's kind of
'cause
a-
I was trying to figure out.
But I do again. I think it's an opportunity for.
I'm taking other opportunities since we have tracked age. And knowing that they're out there working on the other component on the northern side, that's fine. And I know that they're working through the connectivity there.
Yeah.
But then the southern side, is there a connectivity of that trail to tie back to the houses? And I know we've said that there's some grade issues there.
Yep.
But even if you can get the trail up to where it comes out of that ravine, you can cross, that 50 feet
Sure.
or whatever on, you can loop your way back around.
Yeah, there is an opportunity over there.
I'm just looking at some of the other developments that are filling in and how the connectivity of the trails is working out, because the developer is controlling it to a point and then it stops. And so where those stoppages occur, is there connectivity even to wrap it around back to the road to get access to that backside, or is it just a trail behind the townhomes?
But I think we also have to ask the question, just because the developer dead-ended a trail there, what is it gonna cost for the town to make the connection, and who is that really serving? Is it serving the town as a whole, or is it serving just a few Calmonte residents?
I just explore a lot of trails, and when you explore a trail and you run into a dead end, I always go, really?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of there's lots of dead-end trails, and that in town.
I
If you
think,
look
too,
at it from
if
that
you remember,
standpoint, on the edge of developments.
We had the trail, we wanted to extend this trail around and come up to here. But there was this huge ravine. They said, well, we need a 15-foot retaining wall.
Right.
Like, oh, wow, okay. So then we said, well, could we jog it here and come down and cross? And they said, well,
That's not
we need
ADA.
you to get the Army Corps of Engineers involved and do a Clomar,
But,
a
so
conditional order
Patrick,
that
you're
ravine.
saying that lot that's highlighted right now is the town's, but the road that runs through it is actually urban drainage?
It's a maintenance easement from urban drainage, yeah.
Why doesn't the easement show on the property map?
Just because you don't record, it's well,
an
here's
overlay
another
of the
perfect
property.
example. Here's like this piece right here it'll say it's owned by the town, but Boulder County has a legal easement in there. So there are certain things that it's almost more like a contract agreement. One will own the property, but the road, like the access road, is urban drainage's access road.
Anyway, my point is just that there's some developments that are creating trails, and for new connectivity of trails that aren't on our list, we should look at some of how those tie in to the rest of the trail system. And knowing the town center is on the list, just we have these stragglers that, I'm seeing that we were looking for a trail along Colton, along McCaslin from Colton up to Indiana, and some of the trails are getting built in there now, and the interconnectivity is not being addressed on either end. So, anyway, I would say that I would add a couple.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to look at those. See where they fit in to the rankings and stuff.
There it is, right there. Oh, that's an old image.
Yeah. So,
But it is right in that zone, and it just goes down.
Yeah.
The other thing is, where is that trail gonna connect to? There is no sidewalk or trail on that portion of the east side of McCaslin right now.
Yep, and that's
Yeah.
where the other trail, even further down, has the same scenario. It's a trail just to a dead spot.
mhm.
And that's that interconnectivity along McCaslin that we've been talking about.
Just a circle.
I think we might have been a couple of years back, probably a little bit ambitious, thinking that we'd be able to fund that McCaslin Trail, not knowing,
Yeah.
a retaining wall, but.
Okay.
We're gonna have to skip discussion on the next item, but just so it's on everyone's radar, there was some desire in the discussion by board members, why are we not programming, the green space, I don't wanna call it field, because it's not really a field, but the lawn at Wildflower Park.
Because it's defined as a neighborhood.
Well, and I'll say,
So that's something we may want to
Yeah.
address in the future is, do we start allowing, what are spaces that can be programmed?
Yep.
This is one that could potentially be programmed.
And Founders is the second that could potentially be.
well, and
programmed.
I will tell you, this
Right.
one again came up because we have sports teams who call us and say, we would love to rent your fields. And I say, oh, I'm sorry, we actually don't get to program those fields. They say, so we get to program them? So, yeah, so you get to program them. It says, and we don't have to pay you? No, sorry, I can't take your money. So it's gonna come up, just like it comes up at Founders, is that just because the town doesn't program the fields, it is absolutely naive to think that the rest of the world is not programming our fields for free. So it's gonna come up, and
we
sports
program-
teams are moving that way.
We program the
So-
West Fields that.
So it
aren't really
actually
fields, and
gives
don't
more
program the ones
control to the
that are
town
made-
Yeah, but
if they are programmed.
Is there any legal precedence that if the town doesn't program them and folks do program them, and then the town decides to, after, so many years of folks doing it, that they're like, hey, we've been doing this for 10 years, like squatters' rights type thing? Okay.
And you guys would be shocked at how many groups call and say, can we have the rental agreement? What's the price? And we just say, sorry, we don't get to do it. So you can program on it though, with people from outside of town and not pay us, but we don't actually get control over it. So, but.
Interesting.
All right, so looking ahead, Arbor Day is,
21st,
yeah.
April 21st, we've got the
21st
discs
from
ordered
10
for you
to
guys.
noon.
So we got the ring flyers.
Yeah, so if anyone can be there for any portion of the 2 hours, that would be great. Next two, those are all you, Patrick.
Committee coordinator will start next week, or I'm sorry, in April 2nd. Plenty of government experience. We're excited to have her on board. I've actually asked her when she gets going to reach out, meet one-on-one with all the chairs, We're looking at a extensive recruitment process, maybe collecting feedback from existing committee members on what works, what doesn't work, things like that. So
Cool. Arbor Day was what date?
21st. And then what's this Village Green Park bid?
Oh,
construction?
yeah, Village Green Park, for those of you who remember, that's park number 4 in the town center. That was that little kind of rectangular shape. We went back and forth with the developer quite a bit. That'll be our first park of the 5 that'll be built and turned over to us. So they're going out to bid with the plan to start construction probably May or June. So town will have a new park in the town center by the end of the summer.
Cool.
Yeah. So and we'll.
So
yeah.
that will be built by the end of the summer, but we can't get like the skate park built?
Yeah, if we were going to bid right now with an actual set of drawings, but you figure they had a concept drawing more than 2.5 years ago. So if we had drawings and a location, we could have stuff built.
Just need a
Quick.
location.
So.
Just build what we have. Just enlarge it like 30%.
That's kind of what we're thinking. It's not, because I don't want to keep paying these guys just to redesign it.
Yeah.
So I've said, hey, take
The
the
design,
core
just blow it up.
and just like blow it up. And
Put
then,
it on a copier, hit 150%.
yeah, really, the biggest, so here's the 2 biggest challenges. One, it's in a floodplain. They don't really like when you create a rise more than 6 to 8 inches. We said, well, we're going to create a rise more than 6 to 8 inches. And we also had a bowl. And they said, well, if you're going to put a bowl in there, you need to put a drain in there. We said, well, that's not going to work. We don't want a drain in the bottom of the bowl. So we're looking at just some things to maybe kind of shore up one of those walls to make sure that if a flood does occur, that we don't just completely trash the amenity. I think if we could get, if we can get a plan that you guys like, and it's roughly like what we've already seen and approved, and we can get a bid process quickly together for the board and get it knocked out, I think we're constructing something by this summer if all goes well. So, and then in all honesty, on pickleball, if a location comes up, that turnaround, that's quick. That's just a concrete slab. For you guys that were watching Wildflower Park, you remember they did that basketball court all said and done in like a week and a half. So it's not
That
much.
was after they did the grounds.
Yeah, and I really am hoping that because we're not dealing with dirt from people's basements over here, that we're in a floodplain and it's probably a little bit more compacted. I'm really hoping that, and we're also not talking about a major structure. So where we're worried about a pavilion tilting or anything like that. We don't want it to crack by any stretch, but we're also not talking about a foundation for a home or something like that.
Well, when we do that pickleball engagement, can we have an actual paddles?
Yeah. So I'm a couple of things, is do we look at bringing in somebody to help facilitate the conversation? Do we look at different methods? Whatever ideas are out there, I'm all in. You guys let me know and we'll run and put it together. But I'll have the sound study. I'll have an unbiased sound study, which should be conducted either tomorrow or Friday. And we'll see where it goes.
Will you do that at Autry as well?
I've got it at White Raven. I'll have them at it, but I had it at White Raven.
Well, at this point, I would
Community,
almost say just have them do it
Founders.
at Autry and not even bother with White Raven. I mean, you could do it if it's gonna. But if they're saying, oh, an extra location's gonna cost you more money.
It's all said and done. It's less than $2,000. And what the guy does is he sets up the sound monitoring device, and then you go to the location, and we basically said, look, get a bunch of volleys, measure that, and then if we need to bring out multiple people, because I've heard that it's more with 4 or 5 rackets, we can do that too. So,
Well,
I'll
yeah,
have
if you
that.
think if you're gonna have 2, 3, maybe even 4 courts playing at once, it might be good to have
Yep.
2 to 3 pairs hitting back and forth at the same time.
Jock
Because,
Jock had a
because
great comment.
if you're worried about repetitive noise on top of repetitive noise on top of repetitive noise is obviously going to be
It's a lot of noise.
more
I
than just
will-
a single game, you know.
I will be shocked if you hear anything at any of the locations, to be honest.
I am
with you.
too. I don't think honestly, I don't think the noise
I would agree.
is the primary concern. I think the people who are making noise the primary concern they're blowing it out of proportion a little bit because they're watching like these locations that are much close. They're watching like these news stories which are either much closer than we're dealing with, or they're like surrounded by concrete, which is going to echo way more than the natural landscapes that we're mostly dealing with. So.
But we'll knock it out of the park.
The parking,
We'll knock it out of the park.
the taking away space from other amenities, I think those are the bigger concerns.
Mhm. There are some parking concerns at community, but I'm confident if we all put our collective brains together and came up with a really good process.
When the
I
dog
think we'll
park
do that.
is full, what's the parking there look like?
It's full.
And it's interesting because it's not even so much the dog park, because there's kind of this steady like in and out, but it's the steady in and out of the dog park, and then on those weekends when we get like the yardway site, because you can only get 4 vehicles in at a time, it just gets really, really congested. And then Corey, I think, had the point of most people that walk down there walk on Honey Creek because you're trying to
It's not
it's
good.
not the most convenient to get down there unless you're gonna hop over a creek. So there's some of those things that if we're gonna do it, you know, I think we also could look at it as an opportunity to improve maybe the dog park, or we improve parking in general down there. Maybe we put a side path along Honey Creek, if that helps. We get some trail access down there, that might help.
Yeah, that's not a wide road.
No. Well, and it was never intended, it was intended
One
to be a
has no
road to your.
shoulder.
Right. It
No
Yeah.
paved shoulder.
Yeah, so,
When you do your noise assessment, one thing you might want to consider, because I think those paddles probably make a difference in how hard you hit it.
yep.
Right? You know, you get a professional, or not professional, but you get people who've actually played before and are hitting it back and forth. The noise is probably going to be more substantial than just 2 guys going ting, 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 ting.
You would be surprised. So actually, I've reached out to Wayne, who's like the pickleball instructor. But no, we've talked to the guy. Said I want a bunch of like slamming the ball around, and he they told me so it's actually a little bit more like ping pong. You're not
Yeah,
supposed
it's
to hit it all
finesse.
that hard. We know Jacques brought the point of, hey, we were on a grass surface that may muffle it some. I got a couple of questions about the ball hitting the ground. That's not what's audible. What's audible is the pop off the paddle itself. So, I don't think you're going to get much out of the sound test, but we'll have done our diligence, which is important.
Yeah, I think it answers the concerns. So,
Yeah.
I think it's a way to kind of mitigate the community
It
uprising.
answers that question.
Yeah.
And we'll get it. We'll get there. This one's an interesting one. This is the first project that hasn't come from the committee up. It came from the top down. So I think it's just going to take us a little while to figure out the best way to accomplish what we need to. But we'll get it there.
Okay. Meeting adjourned.
I fell off.
Going home. I won't be here. If you're in the Grand Canyon, I'll be
I will be at the Space Symposium.
Space Symposium PROSTAC.
We're actually bringing our fishes
Yeah,
down.
I
ship.
don't understand that choice, huh?
I got 18 vendors I get to go speak with.
Oh, really?
It sucks. I mean, I'm running back and forth, and I have a 25 minutes meeting with somebody, and 5 minutes information with them, and I guess 2 days.
We haven't even got that far
It's
yet
just-
today, but now we got.
It's speed dating because
My last day of pass is not the end of the month.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I'm taking vacation.
And then right after that, or
Right.
actually, take
Friday's my last day.
Then you go to the Grand Canyon?
no, the week before that, I'll be in Germany.
Ooh.
I go to Germany, meet with the vendor, and I come back for 2 days and go to Colorado Springs in the Tuesday, more time in flight than you are in Germany.
No, but when I do go to like the corporate office, I'm there for a week. But I don't see anything. Like I worked, you know, extended day, and then I'm like, I'm not gonna go get on the metro, go to the casino. So I go to the house. Like I see like an office park basically.
I'm gonna feel like
and a
40
mall.
next month. 'Cause next week I'll be in Houston for a week, then I come back for 10 days, then I go to Germany, then I come back, then I go to Colorado Springs, then I come back, then I go back to Houston. So
I don't know, you gotta do it, man. That wears me out.
four trips in a month long.
Oh. Well, man, traveled all over the world.
And I don't travel that much, but
When you do, see, I don't, Parks and Rec, man, we have like a conference here and there, like I'm in DC next week, meeting with a bunch of directors, like on smart city technology, which is really cool. But I didn't
Where
figure
is
it
that?
out in DC. I get actually, staying like right over by where the White House and all that crap is.
make sure you put it.
It's being hosted by, right, well, so